Frankie, welcome to the stream. Took a little break. Not passing the fuck out anymore. Time to play some Fallout 4. Some good old Fallout 4. Oh my god. There we go. Sick.
And I've realized that there are some
Wait up. Yeah, fuck it. I'll toss it up on the screen for you guys too.
really good perks in this game that are actually pretty bad.
Let me tell you something! Let me tell you something!
What I mean by that is that there are a few perks that are highly beneficial to your character,
Terrific.
especially in the early game. But these perks are traps.
It's a trap!
Because picking them can seriously limit your potential in the late game.
That makes sense.
Moreover, there are some perks that are amazing all the time, but they don't work well at all from a game design perspective, and using them can cause you to miss out on some of the more interesting aspects of the Wasteland.
That makes sense.
Let me be clear, this is not a simple list of the worst perks in the game. It's obvious to everyone that Vans is a bad perk, especially if you only choose the first rank. So there's no reason to make another top 10 worst perks in Fallout 4 video. God knows the internet is already saturated as it is. Instead, this video will give you 7 perks that you could easily pick if you didn't know any better, because they all have real, tangible benefits. And it's not that you should never pick these perks again after watching this video. You may very well want to pick them for the roleplay reasons, or simply because they are good perks. I just want to make sure you know what you're giving up by selecting them.
Give orange me, give eat, orange me eat.
With all that being said, I'm going to give you the good perks that I think are actually bad in order of least controversial to most controversial, with the last perk being one of the best in the game, if not the very best. So watch to the end to get infuriated by my god-awful takes. Perks number 7, 6, and 5 are what I like to call convenience perks, because they don't give your character straight benefits in terms of higher damage output or more resilience. They just make life a little more convenient, at least in the short run. They are Lead Belly, Scrounger, and Fortune Finder.
Walt, please just hear me out, please.
Lead Belly is a perk in the Endurance tree, and with all 3 ranks it makes Wasteland food non-irradiating. I've had viewers tell me that it's a good perk to get on survival difficulty, where the player needs to eat to satiate hunger, not just to replenish health or receive bonuses.
Right here. All your needs will be met. I'm hungry! In a minute!
Scrounger is a luck perk that increases the amount of ammunition found in containers, and Fortune Finder does the same thing for bottle caps. These perks are not bad. Well, except Lead Belly. Lead Belly is just bad. I really can't justify putting it in this video, even on survival difficulty. It's really bad. If it was just 1 perk point to completely eliminate all radiation from food, maybe you could justify it, but I still wouldn't get it. Spending 3 entire perk points just to make cram no longer give you radiation poisoning is an absurd thing to do. Just don't eat the cram. It is so easy to hunt animals and cook their meat on survival difficulty. There is absolutely no reason you should ever spend 3 perks on Lead Belly. If you're having trouble hunting enough food, just pick up the Double Meat magazine in Sunshine Tidings Co-op, and you completely eliminate the benefits of this perk, because you'll be drowning in grilled radstag.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
And if you have to eat cram, there's a power armor helmet mod that completely eliminates radiation from food anyways. So you're spending 3 perk points for something that 1 mod does. I would not have included Lead Belly in this video at all if I didn't have multiple comments defending it when I said it was bad in another video.
Lead Belly was one of the first I invested in on survival mode. It's pissing me off.
So if you're one of these people that thinks Lead Belly is good, that's a moral failing. You're not a good person and you have no virtue.
Time to repent your sins.
But as I was saying, Scrounger and Fortune Finder are good perks, and they make life a lot easier in the early game. But the issue with them, and with Lead Belly, is that they solve problems that are only an issue in the early game. The early game, I'd say, is any time before level 40. It's the part of the game in which perks are easy to come by and their apparent abundance can lull the player into a false sense of security in terms of how easy it will be to get perks in the future. However, perks are incredibly rare in the late game. Looking at perks like a commodity distributed to the player over time shows that you should value them incredibly highly and never spend them on a convenience that won't be an issue at all down the road. Creating a stockpile of clean, non-irradiated food is something you can do by level 3. Creating a sustainable source of caps is also achievable through settlement building or quests, though it requires a bit more time to set up. Once you have a source of caps though, you've eliminated the need for Fortune Finder. And if you use those caps to buy ammo, you've just eliminated the need for Scrounger. If you do end up picking these perks and max them all out, in the late game, after you no longer worry about ammo, caps, or food, when you find an amazing legendary for a different kind of build altogether, you won't be able to make that weapon viable by unlocking a different damage perk because you've dumped 11 points into 3 perks that haven't been a problem for you in hours of playtime. So just make the wise decision and skip these perks altogether in the early game. Perk number 4 is not a convenience perk, but something that actively benefits your character, yet can severely limit your potential if you go too far with it. Here I'm talking about the solar powered perk at level 10 of the endurance tree. As a level 10 perk in one of the most important special stats, solar powered should be a little overpowered, and the first rank is fine to get for any build, providing an extra 2 strength and 2 endurance between the hours of 6 AM and 6 PM. The second rank, however, causes sunlight to slowly heal radiation damage, and this can severely limit your character's ability to play some pretty fun builds. The first way this limits you is by blocking you out of a very fun playstyle that becomes available after finishing the Far Harbor questline. Now, I don't want to give any spoilers for new players who haven't played Far Harbor yet, but depending on the ending you choose with Far Harbor, there's a perk that you can get that increases your damage based on how much radiation you have. It's not hard to see how you get this perk, you just gotta ally with the people who are objectively the good guys and have everyone's best interests in mind. That's right, you gotta ally with the radiation worshipping death cult.
Glory to Atom! Glory to Atom! I like these guys. They're funny guys.
This damage perk works super well with the Adrenaline Junkie build that I engineered in my first really popular video, in which you use radiation damage to keep your max health at just under 25% of your full health bar, which makes you constantly receive the benefits of unyielding armor. There are tons and tons and tons of bonuses with this build, and it's honestly a super fun playstyle.
It's the best.
I've made 3 videos about it, exploring the benefits, drawbacks, and how you can set it up for yourself. And yes, that was blatant self-promotion. Like and subscribe please now. Thank you. But the best part of the build is that you can jump into it at any time in your playthrough, provided you have found some unyielding armor. However, if you get rank 2 of the solar powered perk, you can't keep your health under 25% because your radiation damage will slowly heal. And you also can't keep your damage high with the Far Harbor ending perk that I mentioned earlier, because your radiation damage will slowly heal. Thus, unless you're fully decided that you don't want to play a high radiation, high damage, and incredibly high intelligence cannon at any point in your playthrough, I would completely avoid the second rank of solar powered. Perk number 3 limits your damage potential to an even greater extent, although it is even more useful than solar powered. Here, I'm talking about another perk in the endurance tree, Chem Resistant. At rank 2 of the Chem Resistant perk, you gain complete immunity to chem addiction, which is the source of 11 out of the 12 possible addictions in the game.
I can quit my addictive vices anytime I want!
A lot of players pair this perk with Chemist at level 7 of the intelligence tree, which increases the duration of all chems, creating a build that can indulge in as many chems as possible for added benefit with no downsides. And that's certainly a very strong playstyle. However, if you ever find a good weapon with the Junkie's legendary effect, you might start kicking yourself for taking the Chem Resistant perk. Junkies is by far the strongest legendary in the game in terms of damage output. While under the withdrawal effects of all 12 addictions, you do an added 180% more damage.
That's a lot of damage.
This is almost the same as having a double instigating effect on every bullet, no matter what the health of the enemy is at.
No, that's a lot of damage.
In light of this damage potential, the withdrawal effects are not that bad, and they can be mitigated by getting high special stats. Furthermore, if you play that Adrenaline Junkie build that I talked about early, You won't even feel the withdrawals because your special stats will already be ridiculously high from the unyielding armor benefits. Plus your damage will be even higher from the Far Harbor ending. Finally, even if you don't find a Junkie's weapon, curing yourself of addictions is not that hard to do.
It's not that hard.
Refreshing beverages are fairly easy to craft, and you can always buy a Dictol, kill rad scorpions, or just pay a doctor to cure you of your addictions. In my opinion, the potential upside of finding a Junkie's weapon is always greater than the downside of occasionally dealing with an unwanted addiction. And in every playthrough I start, I keep a cooler filled with the rare drugs I find so that I can always easily rack up my addictions if I ever do find an amazing Junkie's weapon.
Julian!
Perk number 2 is going to be controversial, as it is an amazing perk and incredibly fun to use. But I'm disappointed with how the developers implemented it into the game. In fact, when I think about how the nerds that made this game fumbled this perk, I become enraged. I get a rage at the nerds. A nerd rage, if you will. That's right, as you probably guessed, I'm talking about Pain Train. Don't worry, Nerd Rage, you're perfect just the way you are. Pain Train is a level 10 perk in the strength tree, and when maxed out, it is a phenomenal perk, allowing you to knock down human-sized enemies and stagger larger enemies by sprinting into them. There are few things more fun in this game than knocking down an entire group of raiders like pins at a bowling alley. So what's my issue with the perk? Well, my issue with it is that it's at level 10 of the strength tree, which in my opinion is not at all where it should be. One of the biggest benefits of power armor, aside from the added damage and radiation protection, is that entering a suit automatically places your character at 11 strength. Now this isn't plus 11 strength to whatever your strength stat is already at. This is a simple baseline of 11 strength, which is where I am in real life. And then individual character bonuses or penalties like withdrawal effects are applied. For example, if you used a bench press, you have plus 1 strength added to the 11 that the power armor already has, giving you 12 overall. Likewise, power armor paint jobs and mods can increase your strength as well. But the baseline is always 11, and this makes sense from a gameplay perspective because it's not you doing the heavy lifting when wearing the armor, it's the suit. Same as how the squat max of a forklift operator doesn't increase the strength of the forklift. So, in order to maximize the benefit of wearing power armor, you probably shouldn't invest much into the strength line of the perk tree, since every added strength point makes the power armor less advantageous to you. I mean, think about it. A character with 1 strength receives a much larger bonus from wearing power armor than a character with 10 strength.
Boy, that sounds like fortune cookie wisdom to me, Billy.
No, that's just logic.
Now do you see why I think making the best power armor perk sit at the very end of the strength perk tree is bad game design? By going down the strength tree to get this perk, you are actively making your armor worse. It's frustrating to have the pathway to a great perk necessitate limiting the benefits of the very thing the perk is supposed to buff. Furthermore, with 10 strength, deep pockets, and legendary armors, you can probably carry more than you would otherwise be able to while wearing power armor, which makes no sense.
That don't make no sense.
If I were in charge of fixing this problem, I would put Pain Train at either rank 10 of the endurance tree, which increases your ability to sprint for long distances, or rank 10 of the agility tree, which increases the total number of action points you have. In both of those cases, actually getting the perk would buff the ability to use it in the first place, creating synergy. Finally, I think the new rank 10 perk in the strength tree should be called Power Armor Expert or something like that, and allow you to add your character's strength to the power armor's strength, resulting in an incredibly high strength stat when using power armor. You could conceive how this would be possible from a roleplay perspective, as someone who is an expert at wearing power armor could find a way to make their own strength work with the machine, like a strongman sharing the load of a forklift.
Heavy load coming through.
Or the devs could have kept Pain Train where it is, while also adding a power armor modification that does the same thing, but requires both rank 4 of Science and rank 3 of Pain Train to make it. This is probably what assisted servos should have been, but I digress. The final perk that is really good but I think is bad is probably the best perk in the game. It is very easy to spec into since it's not far down the perk tree at all, and it has huge benefits to the player, probably more than any other perk. Without further ado, I'm talking about Lone Wanderer.
What?
Sitting at the 3rd level of the Charisma skill tree, Lone Wanderer is a perk that increases the player's carry weight by 50 and reduces incoming damage by 15% at its 1st rank. At its 2nd rank, which is available at level 17, carry weight is increased by 100 and incoming damage is reduced by 20%. At its 3rd rank, which is available at level 40, right at the end of the early game in my opinion, Lone Wanderer increases the player's damage by 25%. And if you've made it this far into the video, you know that I'm a sleut for extra damage. I'm a damage maxing rad-pilled chem cell.
Do it! Do it! Come on! Kill me! I'm here! Come on! Do it now! Kill me!
I will irradiate 3/4 of my body and get addicted to every single drug in existence for more damage. So it may not come as a surprise to you that for the longest time I've considered this the best perk in the game and have picked it up for every single playthrough I've ever done, except my most recent hardcore playthrough that I just started. So how can I say that this perk is bad? Well, Lone Wanderer only gives you these benefits if you are traveling without a companion, which means anybody that isn't Dogmeat, who, like my gym partner, is a good boy. So are companions good then? Is asking the player to go without a companion too high of a cost to pay for the benefits of Lone Wanderer? No, companions are complete ass. They are absolute dog water and they have very few benefits to the player, yet almost all of them will ruin your sneaking, start random fights, and judge you for taking drugs or picking up junk. Only a handful of them have a good perk to offer the player, and out of that handful, even fewer are fun to keep around. In fact, Dogmeat is absolutely the best companion from a stats perspective just by virtue of not taking away the benefits of Lone Wanderer. So how could I possibly say this perk is bad? Well, companions add something to the game that isn't reflected in the player's stats. They add personality. There was actually a ton of work put into every companion to add interesting voice lines and interactions to tons of quests and locations in the game. In short, there is a ton of content behind traveling with companions that you will straight up miss out on if you never take them with you anywhere. And this content is good. It makes the game better, it makes the world feel more real. But once you've taken the Lone Wanderer perk, even if you start traveling with a companion to receive their perk, you're looking to drop them as soon as possible to get your 100 carry weight and 25% damage increase back.
Better than fist. Strong follow you always. You now Strong's leader.
I think it's best if we went our separate ways.
In summation, from a stats perspective, Lone Wanderer is way too good of a perk.
It's simply too good.
And companions are way too lackluster.
Bye! Bye bye! Bye!
The inspirational perk, which is supposed to be the sister perk of Lone Wanderer in that it makes traveling with companions better, requires 8 charisma instead of 3, and does not benefit the player directly, only indirectly through buffing companions. But it doesn't tell you how much they're being buffed, and spoiler alert, it's not a lot. The 3rd rank only increases their carry weight by 25 pounds, which is disappointing compared to the 100 pounds of carry weight you receive from Lone Wanderer. In every conceivable way, Lone Wanderer beats Inspirational, especially because you actually feel the benefits of Lone Wanderer as the player. This means that the companion system that Bethesda put hundreds of man-hours into developing is completely overshadowed by a single perk, and most players will miss out on experiencing the character of that system. So how would I fix this situation from a game design perspective? Well, the easiest fix would be to seriously nerf Lone Wanderer to make companions better by comparison. But I think a more fun fix would be to heavily buff the inspirational perk. Instead of making it buff companions, give the player buffs for bringing companions on his travels. Rename it from inspirational to friendship or something, and have the 1st rank give the player a +10 buff to all damage resistances when adventuring with a companion. Have the 2nd rank give the player a boost to the effects of all consumables when adventuring with a companion, and have the 3rd rank boost the player's special stats when adventuring with a companion. These bonuses would be sufficiently different from Lone Wanderers, but would make the perk and the companion system itself much more compelling to use. And that is my list of 7 perks that are good but actually bad in Fallout 4. If you agree with me, or if there are some perks you think I missed, let me know about them in the comments. If you disagree with me, keep it to yourself. I don't want to hear it.
Because I don't care.
So back in the early days of Grey Gaming, when I was just starting to try out content other than settlement walkthroughs, I decided to release a couple videos detailing my picks for the best and worst settlement locations in Fallout 4. Well, those videos had a bit of room for improvement, especially in terms of audio quality and gameplay footage, and some folks have brought up some very good points in the comments suggesting my rankings may not have been completely fair. So it's caused me to do a bit of reevaluating. After all, I'm only human. I've been known to make a mistake or two. Also, when we're just discussing the top 5 and bottom 5 out of 37 possible settlement locations, there's a lot of discussion that we miss out on. So that's why today I figured it would be good fun to offer my honest opinion on every single workshop location in Fallout 4. If that sounds like fun to you too, then make sure you have enough build material stockpiled and a hammer ready to swing, because I'm Gray, you're watching Gray Gaming, and today we're ranking every settlement build site in Fallout 4. Of course, just like with our other rankings, we need to talk about the criteria we're using to rank these settlements. Being located in a good location is a very important factor, but we're also ranking these as locations that allow you to build settlements, not player homes. So by our criteria, a settlement location must be able to support multiple NPC families and be self-sustaining. It must allow for either dedicated structures to support living quarters, amenities, and industry/agriculture, or allow for a structure large enough to be segmented into multiple dedicated chambers for said purposes. We'll also be ranking based on the difficulty of terrain, the size of the buildable area in 3 dimensions, and unique handicaps a site may bring, like unscrappable structures for instance. As usual, we will not consider factors that can be improved with mods. As much as I enjoy being a member of the PC master race, we are trying to make this a conversation that console players and purists can find value in as well. Kind of a new addendum to that statement, we also won't be counting the various safe houses and settlement sites that were added in the Creation Club. For the sake of organization, we will split settlement locations into 5 tiers. Not a real settlement, worst of the worst, not so bad, now we're getting somewhere, and the cream of the crop. So let's go ahead and get the easy ones out of the way first. Using the criteria we just stated, there are 3 workshop locations that sort of get instantly disqualified from the running. These are each areas that prevent you from being able to build one or more of the basic types of objects necessary for our settlements to survive on their own. The Mechanist layer is quite problematic. Reaching it is fun and exciting with enough lore and world building sprinkled in that you can forgive the fact that this is obvious DLC content rather than something that feels like it belongs in the base game. But once you unlock the workshop, the layer itself is an underground robot factory, so no pools of water to place water purifiers in and no dirt to plant crops in. Apparently there are some piles of junk on an upper platform that can allow you to place a water pump, but if you were the logical sort that made the mistake of scrapping all junk and debris before starting your build, that ability is now gone. Also, you aren't allowed to plant food or garden plots, so even if you did sneak a water pump in, the site still won't be able to support itself. Of course, the idea here is that this is the Mechanist layer, so you're supposed to use a robot workbench to construct a legion of automatrons, which don't require food, water, or other stuff that keeps us disgusting meat bags alive. But as a true settlement location, it's out of the running. Home plate is a player home, pure and simple. You aren't allowed to plant food, there's no dirt to place a water pump, you can't install a recruitment beacon, you can't build turrets, and you can't even send settlers or companions here either. So yeah, it's a place for you to sleep for free. You know, if you forget about that 2,000 caps that it takes to purchase it in the first place. It's just a place to lay your head in the safety of Diamond City, nothing more. The Boston airport is very similar to the Mechanist layer. There are some dirt patches that let you place a couple water pumps, and the terrain isn't nearly as restrictive as the Mechanist layer, but it's still impossible to create a self-sustaining population here without crops, and without a recruitment beacon, you have to manually assign settlers to the location, though it can be done. As I know will inevitably be stated in the comments if I don't explicitly state this, the airport isn't really intended to be a settlement in the first place. It's really just here for BOS playthroughs if you intend to have Proctor Ingram, the most underrated BOS member in all of Fallout 4 in my opinion, build the molecular relay, and also it builds the parts you need for Liberty Reprimed. So with those sad excuses for workshops out of the way, let's actually start focusing on the ones that feasibly allow you to build self-sustainable settlements, shall we?
When Rory yells at you, it's because Rory loves you.
Yes, Coastal College has fallen in the rankings to dead last. The crumbling house lies smack dab in the center of the settlement and can't be scrapped. The garage is too small to really make any practical use of and is missing a good chunk of the roof, and it can't be scrapped. A quarter of the settlement is a steep hill, another quarter is sheer stone cliffs, and the rest is littered with debris, shipping containers, and trees that can't be scrapped. It's the northernmost coastal settlement and really isn't near any place of importance to the main story. However, there are some redeeming qualities that are often overlooked, like, Anyway, just in case you thought the Lone Raider trapped on the upper floor of the house and the Mirelurks that are living in what is assumed to be an old Yaoguai den are the only dangers you have to deal with, there is a territorial Deathclaw right around the corner who wiped out said Yaoguai, and a Mirelurk queen just down the hill, both of which respawn. Also, a scripted raider ambush on the road below the cottage, and a nearby beach infested with Mirelurks and ferals. It's not plagiarism if you said it the first time, so I feel safe in reiterating that if you just add it all together, you have yourself a recipe for a big old bowl of nope. At the complete opposite end of the Commonwealth on the edge of the glowing sea is Somerville Place, a settlement that's the complete opposite of Coastal Cottage. Just kidding, it's almost just as bad. In its defense, the terrain is much better than Coastal Cottage, so even though the only flat terrain is reserved for the corn patch and roofless house, the rest of the settlement is on a fairly gentle slope, so it's not impossible to work with, just a bit of a pain. The build ceiling is fairly average, so you can build multi-story structures, but the big tree on the edge of the settlement clips branches through the floors, walls, and ceilings of any structure taller than, well, pretty much ground level. But that's about it for the challenges to building, so why is it so far down this list? Well, it's the spawn points for settlement attacks. There are two of them. One of them happens to be right on the default fast travel point for the settlement. So if you don't place that little floor mat somewhere that moves your fast travel point, you're going to jump right into a world of pain if you choose to respond to an attack. The other is right off the front porch of the house, dead center of the settlement. So you can't hide behind a wall, you can't build a tower fortress, you have to leave your settlement wide open and point all of your defenses facing inward, which is so counterintuitive. It was this serious handicap that actually dropped it from the bottom of this tier to almost tying with Coastal Cottage for the worst. Yep, it's still down here at the bottom, but calm down, stop typing, hear me out. I have done some thinking, and it's definitely not the bottom of the barrel like it was with my earlier video. Y'all have brought up some good points. As I already admitted in the first video, its location is very good. It's on the very edge of the Boston ruins, so the raiders aren't as raidery, the Mirelurks aren't so lurkery, and the super mutants aren't as supery. It's a stone's throw from Diamond City, smack dab middle of the map. Location, location, location. But then all the negative things start to come into play. The alley is narrow and cramped, half of it is even bugged, and settler pathing won't allow them to even use the back half. There's rotting corpses everywhere from the previous raider inhabitants. There are two chained doors that can allow enemies to wander into the alley, which they will from the two open entrances anyway. The piles of rubble, ductwork, AC units, and other stuff hanging from the walls cause collision issues, forcing you to resort to things like rug glitches if you want to have any hope of using the majority of the alley's real estate. The widest, most open point in the alley is occupied by an unscrappable stilted shack that can have pathing issues if you make the mistake of clearing the steps leading into it, and the build ceiling cuts you off before you can even get above about 3 to 4 stories, just in case you were hoping verticality could compensate for any of this. Yes, I will admit that if you only care about finding a place for you to sleep where you can upgrade your weapon, whip up a bowl of Radstag stew, and head deeper into the Boston ruins, then Hangman's Alley is a great location, and it makes a lot of sense to allow players to have that port in the radiation storm. But these things do not a settlement make. You're really starting to push the limits of what Hangman's Alley is capable of as soon as you invite a half dozen settlers. If Bethesda had fixed the settler pathing, allowing you to actually use the back half of the alley, correct some of the collision issues, allowing you to make better use of the available space without resorting to glitches, gave a higher build ceiling, or even just allowed us to scrap that daggum shack hogging up most of the valuable real estate, this settlement would not rate nearly so low on this list. Heck, it probably wouldn't even fall into this tier, but they didn't, so it does. Let your hate flow through you. Jamaica Plain isn't all bad. Its location on the southern edge of Boston makes it a great jumping off point for expeditions into Quincy and the southern coastal region of the map. There are 3 main structures in the middle of the build area, a small parking lot that gives you some flexibility, and though the building that houses the workshop is almost completely reduced to rubble, a bit of care with one of the less collision sensitive build sets like the barn or warehouse can allow you to almost completely restore both the ground and second floors of the structure to usability. However, the adjoining building is fairly fairly small and cramped, so you have some options to repurpose it, but they're limited, and the third building is completely boarded up, which sucks because it's completely intact. The biggest issue is that I think most players were wanting the entire Jamaica Plains suburb to be unlocked and buildable, which if you have access to the main drag, the entire wide street between the town hall and the workshop, and the playground to work with, there's a lot of potential that is gained, but we weren't given any of those. Instead, we're stuck with a small driveway surrounded by a bus and pile of rubble, both of which create collision problems without doing much to block unwanted points of entry. At least all of the spawn points are located well outside of the buildable area, so defenses can be appropriately planned, and the build ceiling isn't as bad as Hangman's Alley, so you have options to build up when building out is no longer an option. Outpost Zamunja didn't even feature on my bottom 5 list last time, but admittedly, it probably should have. It's the northernmost settlement in the entire Commonwealth, and probably doesn't even need to be. Unlocking it can be a very dangerous prospect, as this site is home to Boomer, a raider with a suit of power armor and a Fat Man launcher. So you have to be able to hit hard and fast before he has a chance to react and bring a mini mushroom cloud down upon you. Once you do unlock it, the area is not a complete dump, but it's not far from it. There isn't a lot of flat buildable area, though the sloping hillside east of the radio tower does offer a chance for a decent sized platform or tower to be built. The biggest problem people tend to have with this site, and I wholeheartedly agree, is an invincible set of wood stairs inside the buildable area that can't be scrapped. It can't be snapped to other platforms and can't even be targeted with console commands for those PC overlords that are okay with bending a few rules now and then. It's an eyesore, even more so than the shack that was added to the radio tower, which sadly also can't be removed. For the trouble you have to go to unlock this place and the increasingly more dangerous enemies you're bound to encounter as you venture further east or south of here, it's just not worth the effort it takes to unlock this place as a settlement. I really struggled with where to place Covenant. I think Bethesda's put a settlement like Covenant in every single Elder Scrolls and Fallout game, a place that looks safe and inviting on the outside but is harboring a terrible secret underneath. If you choose to unlock Covenant under friendly conditions, which the vast majority of players don't because it's stupid, then you get a walled off, pre-populated settlement surrounded by ballistic turrets. If you choose to unlock it by executing a bit of wasteland justice, then you get a settlement filled with permanent corpses, some of which are marked too heavy to move, so you can't even drag them away at a snail's pace, surrounded by the ever-smoking remains of turrets. Now sure, console commands can remove the smoking turret bases and the bodies, but that's not an option for console players or purists who enjoy the challenge of working within the bounds of the game's mechanics. The doors seem to enjoy locking themselves, so you have to continually unlock them, and since they are marked owned, I believe that if your settlers catch you breaking in, they will turn hostile. Feel free to correct me on that. So your only option is to remove the doors to the houses, destroying any privacy your settlers may have been able to enjoy. The stores that were manned by the pre-existing settlers can't be reassigned to new settlers, so you can't reuse the stores and you just end up with an entire walled-in settlement that has virtually no redeeming features whatsoever. It looks nice though. Croot Manor gets tons of hate in the comments, and I tend to agree. I don't think it's bottom 5, but it definitely belongs in the worst of the worst tier. It's a giant manor on a cliff overlooking the ocean, but the buildable area ends just before the edge of the cliff, so you can't place a water purifier. You're stuck placing pumps. The manor has definitely seen better days, with large sections of walls, ceilings, and floors on every level wasted away and making it pretty much impossible to get any practical use out of it. The circular driveway is nice and level, but there's a big statue and raised flower bed in the middle that does more than a little to hinder your plans for a settlement. The buildable area is rather small, but it does have a decently tall ceiling, so you can build some pretty tall structures, which is usually how I end up dealing with Croot Manor. The feral ghouls that infest this place before you unlock it tend to stick around afterwards, so you know everyone loves to arrive at their new home to find corpses strewn about, and it's not exactly a picnic to reach Croot Manor in the first place. Add the fact that there are multiple nearby random encounter locations and vertibird spawn points nearby, and you can rest assured that when you just want to offload that junk in your inventory, your shopkeepers won't offer you the chance to trade because nearby explosions and gunshots have them roaming around looking for hostiles. Ten Pines Bluff also gets a lot of hate in the comment section, and I'm not sure I completely agree, but I can certainly see where they're coming from. Although it has never really bothered me, I admit that the buildable area isn't as big as it could be. The crumbling house at one end of the settlement infested with rad roaches is a pain to work around, the unscrappable shack on the other end, and the rocky sloping hillside that you have to build on can make civil planning an unwanted hassle. I think it wouldn't have been nearly as bad if the shack was built on the old house foundations, sort of telling the story that the current residents tried to rebuild the farm and the shack is the best they could do given their lack of resources, but all things considered, yeah, it's not a great place to build a permanent settlement. Each of these settlements constitute the worst that the settlement building has to offer and can lead to a lot of players just choosing to abandon that aspect of gameplay entirely, but all hope isn't lost. There are plenty of settlements that are quite a bit better in terms of, well, pretty much everything. Let's start looking at some of the settlements that still ain't the pointiest sticks in the arsenal, but are a heck of a lot better than anything we've talked about thus far. So this was originally in my 5 worst settlements, and I have to agree that it was rather unfair toward Vault 88, but I still stand by the criticisms that were leveled against it, with some caveats. Vault 88 is a sprawling labyrinth of underground caves, train stations, tunnels, and basements. It's unlocked bit by bit as the sole survivor clears debris and fights to clear out new infestations of mole rats, rad scorpions, and even deathclaws. An interesting use of the workshop mechanic, and one I wish we got to see more of in Fallout 4. But once the gunshots cease to echo in the abyss and we settle in to build a better life below ground, Vault 88 loses its appeal almost as quickly as, well, the vast majority of other vaults. The cave system is massive, requiring a total of 4 workshops to gain access to the whole site, and the boring monotony of clearing all of the raw uranium, limestone, junk vault parts, and construction equipment to allow access to the whole thing, add the resources to your workshop, or just reduce the build limit to something manageable is more than a lot of players can bear. As many commenters on that video will attest, it's technically possible to create a vault that stretches from one end of the cave system to the other, but since settler pathing only allows them to use the main rail yard chamber, it's pretty pointless to spend the time painstakingly lining up your vault to do so. I stated that settlement attacks can take several minutes to deal with as the attackers have to travel down said long tunnels and passageways in order to reach the main chamber, but I also wasn't aware at the time that they can also glitch out and get stuck, forcing you to run the entire length of Vault 88 to the spawn points to deal with them yourself. Some people have pointed out that if you simply don't unlock the various alternative entry points, the attackers will only ever approach from the main vault door, but that's not a mechanic that is ever explained and runs completely counterintuitive to pretty much every basic fundamental rule of settlement building that we had learned up to that point. I don't want to get drawn into a bunch of drama that for some reason surrounds Vault 88 discussions, like people get super defensive or combative about it, so I'll just finish up. But if you want a slightly more expansive list of reasons why it's the very bottom of this tier, you can check out my 5 worst settlements video, it's in there. I actually like Longfellow's cabin, but as I started to weigh its pros versus its cons, it just kept slipping lower and lower on this list until it ended up here. It's not all bad, it's an island, but connected to the main map of Far Harbor by a tiny spit of land, so it's easily reached pretty much as soon as you arrive at the island. It has a very respectable build size and even has decent ceilings, so you can build wide and tall, but other than these benefits, it pretty much suffers from the 2 things that make Coastal Cottage and Somerville Place nightmares to build at. The island surrounding the cabin is home to some pretty tricky terrain, a deep drainage cutting through what should be prime real estate, long sloping hillsides, sheer rock cliffs. It really limits the storytelling that many settlement builders tend to try and weave into their settlements. Also, enemies spawn very close to the cabin, so much like Somerville, it can be tricky to position defenses in a manner that doesn't suspend belief, but also, you know, works. Greentop Nursery is a site I personally could do without, but admittedly it's not totally horrible. It's a pretty large buildable area even if the vast majority of that space is occupied by the shattered remains of a greenhouse. It has a pretty tall build ceiling allowing you to go tall or go home, and the sanctuary style home at the south end of the settlement is, well, it's about as useful as any of the houses in Sanctuary. It's sort of a settlement site that has a predefined story and purpose. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just not a great thing. The main reason I say I could do without it is literally right across the road is another location, Breakheart Banks, the remains of a farm built in, on, and around an old roadside rest stop before it was wiped out by super mutants. In my opinion, Breakheart Banks has much more potential and character, and as it is, Greentop Nursery sits a bit too close to the slog for me to consider it really that necessary. Bunker Hill is probably best summed up as wasted potential. It's a rotting, crumbling shantytown surrounding Breed's Hill, the actual site of the Battle of Bunker Hill. I know it's confusing. The game gushes over the caravan trading hub of Bunker Hill, and I guess by Commonwealth standards it's pretty good, but when I learned after literal years of playing this game that you could actually build here, I was extremely excited to finally clean it up and turn it into a fortress, only to learn that not a single shack can be scrapped. Imagine being able to surround Bunker Hill with a concrete wall, a castle keep with turrets, heck, a perimeter made out of vault-tech corridors, anything but 200-year-old dried-out lumber. My disappointment grew even deeper as I recently visited Bunker Hill in person and actually saw how close Bethesda came to accurately representing the area before they ruined it with this scrapper nonsense. Grey Garden is sort of all the bad things about Greentop Nursery with none of its benefits. It's a greenhouse that is missing so much glass that it can't possibly function as an actual greenhouse anymore on a steep hillside with no other structures that are of any use, even some unscrappable cars and trees for good measure. So why on earth did it rank higher than Greentop Nursery? One word: overpass. That's right, the build ceiling of Grey Garden is actually tall enough that you can build a platform up to the nearby raised highway and clear off the cars to build yourself a nice elevated sniper's hide and safe house. It would have been nice if the enemies spawned farther away than the front door of the greenhouse to allow some sort of civil planning on the ground, but it is an interesting mix of features that can be found at other settlement sites. As far as the northern coastal settlements go, Kingsport Lighthouse probably has the most character. It has a boat that still sort of floats, a wharf, of course the lighthouse, Lightkeeper's house that's still most-ish of the way intact. The buildable area isn't tiny, and the ceiling is very tall. I'm not sure how tall, but I'm pretty sure I've pulled off 12-story tall structures in past playthroughs. The main drawbacks of Kingsport are the large number of unscrappable objects that get in your way, the Lightkeeper's house, the big tree out front, the truck and trailer blocking the road, the crumbling wharf. Some might even argue the lighthouse itself, but even though its landings are too small to realistically accomplish a whole lot with, I like the lighthouse, and it's the only settlement site that gives you an intact lighthouse. I just wish that there was a nice strong light source that we could add to it to actually make it a functional lighthouse. The terrain is mostly flat, but is tiered between an upper flat that hosts the lighthouse and the Lightkeeper's quarters, and the lower beach, which contains the boat, the boardwalk, and the war pier. Okay, I'll cut it out. These sections are separated by cliffs, but at least Bethesda was nice enough to add stairs leading down so you don't have to build them yourself. Any open area you have is cramped, but a little bit of creativity can take you a long way at Kingsport Lighthouse. Murkwater construction site gets so much hate from the community, and I sorta get it. It's the southernmost settlement in the entire game. The area is infested with everything from Mirelurk Kings to sentry bots, and the construction site itself is guarded by a Mirelurk Queen. So pack ammo and stim packs if you plan on setting down roots here. But beyond that, the site itself is less than appealing. It's a swamp, so you're surrounded by shallow strands of stagnant water, burned trees because you're right next to the glowing sea, the unfinished garage, and the completely collapsed house that can't be scrapped. Heck, even the forklift can't be done away with. So it's completely understandable why Murkwater is so despised, but it's not all bad. One nice thing about swamps is they tend to be pretty level, so you really don't have rough terrain to deal with. As long as you're okay with building on a platform, you know, place a solid level foundation and then build up, then Murkwater can actually be turned into a halfway passable settlement. You're not going to be building the next Diamond City or anything out here in the swamps, but a small village isn't an impossibility. And a fun note for those of you that have been with the channel since the beginning, it was Murkwater that first caused me to experiment with the idea of a tower build. Okay, I love Oberlin Station. I don't know, I'm just a sucker for settlements built on the train tracks. One thing I really love about Oberlin is that there's just a single structure you really have to worry about not being scrappable, and it's relatively tiny, giving you almost complete freedom to work with the grounds that you're given. The terrain admittedly isn't the best, with pretty much the entire settlement being a sloping hillside. There isn't much of a flat spot to build on, so you have to get creative, and the build area is small, one of the smallest in the entire game. It might even have Coastal Cottage be in that regard. But attackers tend to spawn either on a fairly open hillside, making them easy pickings, or they spawn all the way down on the beach, allowing you to attack from the railroad tracks from the safety of the high ground.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground.
And it's here where our list turns a corner and gets to stop focusing so much on the cons of settlements and gets to start focusing more on the pros column. 19 bad settlements down, 18 good settlements on their way. But before we move on, I would just like to ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, a like would really be appreciated, as viewer engagement is a metric we use to determine the sort of content that provides the most value to you, a random person on the internet who has the power to determine whether I can afford to splurge on a pack of Fancy Lad snack cakes this week. Please, thank you, and now let's hop on over to the next tier. Kicking off the Now We're Getting Somewhere tier, the Taffington Boathouse is an excellent location. Positioned almost center of the north half of the map, it makes an excellent jumping off point for expeditions into Charleston or the northern coastline. It also makes a good provision or trade hub. The main limitation of the boathouse is its very small build area, most of which is occupied by, you might have guessed by now, a boathouse and a nice 2-story house that's almost completely intact. The build ceiling is pretty decent though, nothing out of the ordinary. It does have a decent amount of buildable area over the water, allowing you to try your hand at a nautical themed settlement before you make it to the big leagues with sites like Kingsport Lighthouse, Spectacle Island, and Dalton Farm. Sunshine Tidings is a nice sprawling farming community that marks the last settlement west of the Charles River all the way until you reach Somerville Place. It's both fun and interesting that the main road leading into Sunshine Tidings is a dam, begging the question as to how the heck you would drive a combine over that. The settlement site is surrounded by the rotting cabins that made up the various family domiciles of the pre-war residents. Some large silos, though I'm not sure what they were intended to hold, as there appears to be a large pipeline that runs from beyond the edge of the map, so they probably aren't grain silos or milk tanks. I feel like I'm dipping into lore here. Back on topic. The settlement itself is fairly level with a slight but noticeable slope running pretty much the entire length of the settlement. Some of the settlements are in good enough shape to repurpose, and the warehouses are still actually in pretty darn good shape. The layout can make it a bit tricky to plan new dwellings, but it's not any worse than Sanctuary, and you do have quite a bit of open ground to work with, which is why I tend to film a fair number of my Commonwealth contractor videos here, or at least I did before I ruined it with a settlement builds for noob site. Moving on. A common favorite among commenters, the Red Rocket has a lot going for it. There is just so much that makes this a great settlement location. It's got lots of dirt for farming, the Red Rocket is in perfect condition from its roof and walls that are free of holes to the rolling shop gate and sliding doors that are still functional. It just brings so much character to the settlement building. Every crafting station, minus some that were added in DLC later, can be found at the Red Rocket, making it an instant favorite for those that aren't all that into settlement building or plan to come back to it later on. So it makes for a good ready-made player home. And best of all, we get to meet the best friend any Soul Survivor could ask for in the entire Commonwealth right here at the Red Rocket. With all that positive stuff said, there's still a lot of room for improvement. The hedges do add a bit of natural barrier in places, but it's also a bit of an eyesore that you have to incorporate into defenses if you plan to wall off the settlement. The majority of the flat terrain is paved, so it's difficult to find a spot for water pumps or crops, and what isn't paved isn't all that level. There's also piles of junk and debris that would have been nice to clean up. Considering how intact the Red Rocket is, it would be nice to be able to go for a cleaner aesthetic builds if we wanted that option. You can still build decent sized settlements here, nothing massive or anything, but in all fairness, given the nearby Abernathy Farm and Sanctuary, the scenes in the opening credits, and the fact that there aren't any Minuteman quests to unlock the Red Rocket as a settlement, it's more than likely that this location was intended more as a player home rather than a full-fledged settlement site. Still, she ain't half bad. You ever hear about that farm run by ghouls? Isn't that something? I enjoy hearing that phrase about as often as I enjoy hearing about people taking an arrow to the knee. The Slog is an oddly gross sounding name for a settlement that is in reality really cool. Built in the remains of an outdoor swimming pool, the Slog is the only settlement location where tarberries can be raised in a safe domesticated environment. The Slog actually has a fairly well diversified farm that you usually don't see in Fallout 4, with most farms just having a single staple crop, so good on the ghouls there. The build area is decent, the changing rooms are mostly intact minus some shattered windows and skylights, and the entire settlement is very flat and has a decent amount of ground to build off of. The main problem is that the settlement does not lend itself to renovations. The beds are all rusty and falling apart and just kind of scattered about. It would have been nice to have the option to completely clear out the changing rooms if we wanted to go for a cleaner build, or at the very least just line up the beds properly. Also, the settlers here are all scheduled to spend some time tending the crops, whether they're actually actually there or not, so if you choose to relocate the garden or build over the top of it, the existing ghoul settlers will just sit there hoeing and pulling weeds on your nice new laminate flooring. Of course, these are only problems if you're not cheating with mods or console commands and are a bastage who doesn't mind wiping out a peaceful settlement of non-ferals. But who doesn't play that way? So the best way to describe Finch Farm. Take Grey Garden with its big farm and its intact section of raised highway, get rid of the no longer functional greenhouse, and change steep hillsides to gentle rolling hills. Pretty much nothing unique about it at all other than the manner in which it's unlocked, but it does just about everything better than the other settlements that it shares these features with. County Crossing is almost identical to Finch Farm, minus the overpass, so why does it rank higher? First and foremost, there is standing water at County Crossing, so you can place water purifiers instead of having to resort to water pumps. I don't know why it's a plus, but it's a plus. County Crossing is located just a stone's throw away from Charleston, giving you fairly easy access to the Constitution and Bunker Hill, not to mention that directly across the street lies the National Guard Training Depot, a site that contains 2 power armor chassis, so it's a great place to load up and prepare before you venture into the most dangerous sections of Boston proper. Echo Lake Lumber is such a unique take on the settlement building formula. We have shoreline, we have a dock, we have flatland, sloped land, flat rock face, we have bleachers, admin buildings, and sheds. There really isn't any place quite like Echo Lake. The problem is that the admin building can't be restored without serious rug and pillar glitching. The bleachers are piled high with garbage that sort of makes them pointless. The outbuildings are all boarded up, the dock is too small to do anything with, and there's really not all that much buildable area over the water to play around with a nautical theme. You know, that thing that was introduced with the Far Harbor DLC that takes place on a freaking island. These limitations aside, I still have loads of fun building here. I don't think I've ever built a settlement that supported fewer than 12 people comfortably, and even if you ignore the admin building and bleachers, there's still a lot of real estate to work with. To be honest, I never really took a serious look at the castle until about a year ago when I was needing another site for settlement builds for noobs and decided to try restoring the walls, and I think that's really the main intended purpose here. For what it is, it's a great location. The sections of walls that are still intact still offer plenty of cover. The central courtyard offers a decent amount of area to build around. It would have been better without the massive radio tower in the middle, but hey, it serves a valid lore and gameplay reason for being there, so I won't whine that it's unscrappable. It takes a ton of TLC, attention to detail, and time to get it restored close to its former glory, but it is doable and pretty much necessary for anyone going through a serious Minuteman playthrough. Speaking of essential Minuteman settlements, Sanctuary tends to get a lot of hate, not so much because of its settlement building features and challenges, but because it's so closely tied to the Marcy Longs and the Preston Garveys. But strip away other settlements that need our help and Sanctuary has loads of pre-existing foundation pads and open space for building, not to mention homes that are still standing, even if they realistically would be death traps. It's a meandering cul-de-sac, so it's a bit of a challenge for players who prefer to build on a grid, and the ceiling is a bit low for such a large settlement, but it makes for a perfect training wheel settlement, which is sort of the entire purpose of Sanctuary in the first place. There is a bit of an overblown amount of hate that people tend to heap on Sanctuary that it really doesn't deserve. You see, there's this thing called the Triangle of Death, where Sanctuary Hills, Red Rocket Truck Stop, and Abernathy Farm are so close to each other that the game engine will actually attempt to render all of the objects within all 3 settlements at once. Now this is dangerous enough in vanilla play on lower grade systems like Xbox 360s and such, but people who resort to certain features to expand the build limit or just flat out cheat by using console commands or mods to expand these settlements to ridiculous levels can even bork your game on the latest and greatest systems. But that's not really the fault of Sanctuary, Red Rocket, or Abernathy. It's the fault of people who destabilize their games with mods. Wait, I'm sorry. All I'm saying is, if you intentionally bypass components that are there for your benefit, you can't get angry if the system fails. So Warwick Homestead can be a bit of a crapshoot to unlock. I've gone back to Preston dozens of times to get yet another Radiant quest in hopes of unlocking, only to go entire playthroughs without ever getting a quest to help Warwick. And sometimes players like to keep the game in Act 1 so they don't have to deal with crashing vertibirds all the time, but this also kinda locks you out from the guaranteed method of unlocking Warwick by doing chores for the Institute. Despite the complete pain in the gourds to actually unlock Warwick, it's a complete joy to build, despite how small the buildable area actually is. is. It's easy to defend since there's only one enemy spawn point. It has an okay build ceiling, and the big concrete building isn't especially spacious on the inside, but it's completely intact, and the little outcroppings and balconies everywhere make for natural turret platforms. The dookie tanks can't be removed, which sorta sucks, but it's easily worked around. I could have done with a bit more buildable area over the water, but that's just personal taste. I like waterfront builds. And with that, I think we are ready to not even close. Things are about to get interesting, because if you've been paying attention, we've now covered not a real settlement, worst to the worst, not so bad, and now we're getting somewhere. So now that brings us to the cream of the crop. Let's get at it. Okay, it's no longer in my top 5, but Egret Tours Marina is still pretty dang good. It's a bit out of the way to be useful as a base camp for expeditions into the south of Boston or the Glowing Sea, but a pre-built dock over plenty of water, all but one of the buildings are accessible, largely intact for the most part, repairable without having to resort to glitches. It's very easily walled off and defended, decent build ceiling, very level territory, plenty of dirt for crops. I won't spend any more time on it. It's just good. Check it out. Big settlements are nice, but if you're not one for the ease of building on flat terrain, then give the National Park Visitor Center a once-over. It does have lots of flat ground, but it's split between multiple tiers. There's also gentle sloping terrain, concrete steps, the large gift shop and pass center. I generally gravitate towards large, flat, and unobstructed build areas, but I have to admit there's something magical about building large in a place like the Visitor Center. For a very long time, I think Nordhagen Beach was my favorite settlement. The only unscrappable structure is a fully intact brick shed, minus some shattered windows, but we've seen a lot worse over the course of this video. The beach is an actual bona fide beach, lots of sand, sloped terrain, quite a bit of buildable area over the water. It makes for a perfect location for a waterfront resort, a boardwalk commerce center, and more. The build ceiling is quite tall, allowing for impressive towering structures, or since the build area is also wide, you can do a shanty town on the sand, directly across the water from the airport, across the bridge from Easy City Downs, across the peninsula from Libertalia, and on the road to Fort Strong. There's a lot of unique stuff to see nearby, and it makes an excellent outpost. If you're needing just that little cherry on top to actually take the time to check out Nordhagen Beach, there is a suit of power armor just up the road that tends to spawn with XL1 parts if you're high enough level. So what are you waiting for? Go check it out. It's difficult not to sing Abernathy Farm's praises. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but its benefits far outweigh its faults. It's just a couple minutes away from Vault 111, so it's often one of the first settlements that players unlock, especially if they aren't playing on rails and trying to speedrun the main story. Abernathy Farm's probably one of the most balanced settlements in the entire game, offering a fairly large build area and a ceiling that allows for 20-story high-rises. You're going to be limited only by your imagination, and that whole triangle of death thing we mentioned earlier, but mostly it's your imagination. The settlement has lots of flat terrain, but it also has a somewhat steep sloping hillside as well, so it sort of serves as a training platform for new wasteland architects who have only experienced the winding streets and small foundation pads of Sanctuary, or the confines of the Concorde Red Rocket. The giant shack built in the framework of an old power pylon can't be scrapped, so it does sort of force you to choose between a shantytown style build or having that big ol' eyesore towering over your settlement. Other than that, Abernathy Farm is awesome. Dalton Farm is a lot more troublesome to work with than Nordhagen Beach, with steep slopes and rocky outcroppings limiting your options to build over the land. However, Dalton Farm does have a long clear beach and the most buildable area over the water, proportional to total size of settlement of course. This allows for an oceanfront build unlike any possible at any other settlement location. It can be a bear to unlock as you have to clear out a famished fog crawler who ain't no pushover, but all things considered, it's in a good location. I mean, as good as a location all the way out on the island can be. So we had a lot of gushy-mushy things to say about the Red Rocket truck stop, but the cramped and rough terrain that surrounds it makes it a pain that causes a large number of players to simply relegate it to the role of player home. Wouldn't it be nice if we had an intact Red Rocket but just plopped it down on an open field somewhere? Oh, we do?
perfect.
In all fairness, the Nuka World Red Rocket isn't perfect, but it's probably as close as you're going to get. It does have some small puddles that are just large enough to plop a small water purifier, but if you think about it, purifying a mud puddle is about as stupid as trying to use an aerosol can of compressed air as a leaf blower, especially when a powered water pump provides the same amount of water and makes a lot more logical sense. The buildable area around the Red Rocket is huge and quite level, with just a slight slope on the eastern edge of the settlement. It has a tall, though not atmospheric ceiling, but not every settlement needs a skyscraper. That's forgivable. The biggest letdown for me is the things that really made the Red Rocket and Concord unique. The rolling shop gate and sliding doors are missing in the Nuka World Red Rocket, but the Nuka World Red Rocket does have a wraparound painting that's super cool, as long as you don't accidentally scrap it as you're cleaning up. Oops. But the thing that really makes this site worthy of a top 5 spot is that it has a single enemy spawn point, making it very easy to plan defenses around. I'm a little disappointed that we only got one new settlement in the Nuka World DLC, but the one that we did get is awesome. Spectacle Island didn't even make my top 5 settlements video, and I admit that was a glaring oversight on my part. Sure, it's no picnic to reach, especially if you don't have the Aqua Boy / Girl perk, because you have to swim to it. Once you get there, there's a bit of a puzzle to unlock it as a settlement, and you have to chase off the Mirelurks that seem to occupy the entire rather large island. Once you do unlock it, you start to realize just how huge it is, mostly due to the pure tedium of clearing the dead forest away. But hey, you'll never want for wood again. Famous last words. The terrain is very difficult to work with, but you just have so much of it available that eventually you're bound to find a plot of land to suit your settlement building purposes. It also has a decently tall build ceiling, even if measured from the highest point on the island. It has more coastline than any other settlement, but the distance you can build away from the shore is actually fairly short compared to places like Dalton Farm and Nordhagen Beach, so if you're looking for docks and stuff, it's going to be pretty hard to find a spot for it. So despite all the praise that can be heaped on it, there is an equal amount of negatives that also come along with it, making it the single largest settlement in the entire game while also presenting one of the greatest challenges to build here. It's no wonder that so many players list Spectacle Island on their top 5 just because it suits so many different people's playstyles and needs. Sliding once again into our number 1 spot, Starlight Drive-In carries a lot of weight in that pros column with almost nothing in the way of cons. It has a large pool of water, one that actually might make sense to sink a water purifier in if we're being honest. It's a large, almost completely flat parking lot, so you know, easy to build on without having to resort to a cobbled together tiered mess. It's got a very large perimeter and very tall build ceiling, allowing for at least 9-story tall structures in my sickeningly basic experience. The screen house, admin office, storage room, and concession stand / projector house are all unscrappable, but since they're located on the fringes of the settlement, they really don't impede your creativity all that much, and they're for the most part intact, so you can reuse them if you want. It's located right next door to the Drumlin Diner south of Concord, so you have easy access to a predictably available junk dealer very early in game. It's right on the edge of the easiest section of the map, so there's not a whole lot to have to worry about beside low-tier bugs and Mirelurks and unleveled raiders. It's also the reason that to unlock this place, all you have to do is clear out a minor mole rat infestation, and if the Concord Red Rocket taught us anything, it's that mole rats are tasty, unless you eat them on a stick. It's located in a roughly central portion of the northern map, so it makes a great provisioner hub and a great jumping off point as you begin to tackle the late stages of the first act as you start venturing south in an attempt to reach Diamond City. Though there is a random encounter location underneath the train bridge which can cause frequent combat triggers, there appears to only be one spawn point during actual settlement attack events, making it a simple matter to plan defenses around. Easy to unlock, easy to build at, easy to plan around, and large enough to accommodate a significant settler population, it's no wonder that Starlight is the best settlement site in all of Fallout 4. But now it's your turn. Tell us your best and worst picks for settlement build locations in Fallout 4. We were a bit shorter with a lot of our summaries, a bit shorter with our summaries, so there's bound to be things that we didn't mention about each one, so feel free to set me straight in the comments below. Until next time, it's been real, stay safe, and we hope to see you here next time on Gray Gaming.
Fallout 4 is a game that boasts tons of items to collect, and in order to grab the many weapons, magazines, bobbleheads, and even companions, this will take you throughout the Commonwealth on your journey to cement the sole survivor as the savior of post-apocalyptic Boston. But what if you wanted to do and see everything the game had to offer? Well, in that case, you could just look at the achievement list of the game and use that as an outline. Well, what if that wasn't enough? Well, to that I'd say you should use the in-game statistics tracker along with the achievement list. That would surely fulfill your quest, right? But this is still child's play. Let's push this even further. We're aiming for a true 100% run. I'm talking all quests, all achievements, all in-game stats, all unique apparel, all unique weapons, all companions, all companion perks, all magazines, all bobbleheads, all perfectly preserved pies, all settlements, all locations discovered, all holotapes, all notes, all super mutant armor, and every character level. Driving home the insanity behind this massive collectathon, I also didn't use any mods to level the playing field. What I do here should be able to be replicated on console without the fear of turning your Xbox to PlayStation into an IED. I also banned the use of exploits and glitches, meaning this entire run is about as vanilla as you can get. Meaning we may run into some issues. To state the obvious before heading in, this can't all be done on one playthrough, meaning this will be spread across 4 separate playthroughs but on one account, as there's more than one quest requiring multiple outcomes to gain every reward. So our first run will be done in survival, with the other 3 being done on very easy. This video will also only cover the base game since I severely underestimated the amount of time this would take. My original goal was 66 hours. How long do you think this would take? Without further stalling, let's dive in and see just how much the Commonwealth has to offer for those willing to pursue it. With all characters venturing out into the Commonwealth, choosing a face to invoke fear in the hearts of their adversaries is crucial to survival. This should do just fine. And now with the Vault Tech rep arriving, it was time to set my stats. A 6 in strength to carry all of the loot I could get my grubby little hands on, using perception as a dump stat because who needs to be aware of your surroundings when the potential of a one-shot kill is lurking around. Endurance at 9 to prevent over-leveling when I grab the namesake bobblehead. Charisma at 5 for the ability to talk my way out of fights and to earn some extra caps along the way. Intelligence at a 1 to capitalize on Idiot Savant for faster leveling. Agility at 2 to help with some extra action points, and 4 in intelligence, which would allow for the Your Special book to boost it to 5, and begin the most annoying sound effect in the game to kick off every chance it gets. With my fate sealed and awaiting the end of the world, I watched as my husband carried our son with such finesse, it made my character lose any future hair she would eventually grow. Now that the bombs had dropped and I was getting accustomed to my coffin-styled apartment, I watched as a man with dashing good looks came into our new vault and punished Nate for his terrible baby carrying, before passing it off to his assistants, because he can't be giving away all his secrets now, can he? But put all of that to the side. We're free now and we've got a long list to do. Racing through the vault and grabbing everything not bolted down, I made some rad roaches dance in a hallway before being released back to the surface. And before we get too much further, are you ready to watch the earliest mess up of the run? See if you can spot it. Racing past the useless Mr. Handy that couldn't even keep my house clean during an atomic detonation, I visited the cellar to retrieve some gold bars before heading inside my abode to grab a Grognak comic and the Your Special book to bump my luck up to 5. Last thing left to do was to grab the grenade stashed in a mailbox leading out of town, pick up a stray dog who would help me terrorize some mole rats guarding a fusion core, leap atop some buildings for early power armor as well as a minigun with almost 1,300 rounds, and then booking it to Diamond City to meet with my favorite chem junkie trader. Just remember to share your great mentats with her as she'll toss you a discount when checking out her wares. Meaning spray and pray and all the 45 ammo Cricket is carrying is coming with me. Now armed with my own personal weapon of mass destruction and a random dog I found, I headed back to Concord to break the Minutemen out of their impromptu prison. Yeah, that can't be good. Welcome to survival mode, ladies and gentlemen! Seeing how I was thrown a bone here to fix my previous goofs, I would have been smart to capitalize, but that same mistake in Sanctuary was repeated while I ran off to meet with Cricket once again, this time skipping the power armor and minigun. Why, you may ask? Not only will it help with clearing out the Deathclaw and Raiders, but if I'm being honest with you, I forgot. Who would have guessed trying to balance all of this in one smooth motion would cause your brain to miss optimal plays? Like trying to talk down Wolfgang even knowing I had a coin flip to actually pass. But even with that being said, I was able to purchase our early weapon of choice, saved this time, and without time being crucial anymore, we helped out the Brotherhood of Steel to open up their questline for the future. Once again back in Concord, the Raiders had practically left town. Even Preston had gotten bored and headed inside. This just meant that I was able to blitz through any foes inside the Museum of Freedom, then grab the magazine upstairs as well as the Perception bobblehead, before talking to Preston and the gang about helping them out. Thankfully, that minigun power armor combo that I passed up earlier was all that was needed here, which not only freed Preston's group, but also allowed me to scour the civic access in the town for another magazine. However, even with Concord officially sorted, this did not net me the outcome that I had come to expect. With the Minutemen back in Sanctuary, I was planning on grabbing Preston as my companion and running him through the Commonwealth to grab all the settlements along the way. But it turns out, he doesn't actually become a companion until after you deal with 10 Pines Bluff, meaning Codsworth becomes our first companion that we'll need to grind affinity for since we're in the area. With the goal being to completely clear out areas of any importance to avoid backtracking, Codsworth and I first ran to Satellite Array Olivia. Inside there is the locket needed later for the Abernathy Farm quest, but also a magazine and fusion core if you're hunting those, which we will be. Plus Ak-Ak, of course, who poses no threat against the Raider Stomper. I won't be covering every single one of the pickups we grab unless they do multiple things for the run, but I never said anything about showing the footage.
Just had to push, didn't you?
Let me ask you a question. When faced with a member of the elderly who had to trek 20 miles back and forth on their way to school in the rain, snow, and atomic annihilation, do you think you'd be able to take them on when faced with the ultimate game of Think Fast? Nope! Didn't think so! But Think Fast only catches you off guard once. And when the shit that used to work just don't work now, you literally just hold the trigger down and pray, as you bounce around to show off your ability to still possess working joints. Oh look! A free magazine! With a foothold secured, my next goal was heading towards Salem to smash out every location along the way, but considering the right side of the map was a bit of a higher level than what I currently was, the multiple one-shots deterred any game exploration into the area. So instead, what about heading over to Corvega? Not only does it have multiple locations along the way with some goodies, but it still falls into early game, meaning it'll just be fighting raiders. On the way over, I stopped by the aftermath of a pilot telling his passengers he's gonna do a sick flip, ran through a cemetery that will no doubt not be big enough to house all of the deaths heading my way, raced through a few minor areas that really only count because they are locations with only a few housing anything of importance, and then made it to Walden Pond to grab Big Jim. Codsworth up until this point had been the literal worst. He only cared about me upgrading armor and weapons or wanted me to be nice to everyone. And quests weren't on the menu quite yet, which means not only was this companion not doing much in the way of damage, but because of this character model, he made for the perfect hallway blocker. And to add even more spice to the list, if he went down at all, this meant I was running all the way back to Sanctuary to pick him up again due to the lack of robot repair kits. Fuck you, Codsworth, I'm glad we're getting your perk done first. With Walden Pond sorted, we arrived at the Lonely Chapel, which led to the federal ration stockpile. Inside here was a magazine along with Red Tourette. This also housed an entry into a raider camp and a legendary raider, but for some reason, this area was crafted meticulously by Todd to shave years off of my life, as I spent far too long just trying to reach the end on what felt like an ever-moving finish line. At least Corvega was easier than that hellhole. this never-ending rifle is going to help out tons moving forward. But whereas I was tearing through these guys with little to no issue, grabbing the magazine in Jared's quarters was the only thing on my mind. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense, that's one of your metrics. And yes, you'd be correct, but so is the bobblehead at the top of Corvega. You know, the one I didn't grab while I was here. Lucas, I need to drown my woes in your store for a bit, and I'm positive not buying every legendary piece you have won't come back to bite me later. And while I'm here, I might as well take the test to get into Covenant before turning in the quest back at 10 Pines and then sprucing up Sanctuary for a bit of easy XP. On our next session, I decided to head back to Corvega for the bobblehead, but since we were in the area, knocking out the Super Duper Mart in Lexington made for a good pit stop. Just keep in mind when you visit this place at night, the locals are more than keen to toss you a light. Thankfully, Mystic Pines is just outside of town and offers a place to lay your head along with the magazine to boot. With a save close by, I headed back into town to sort out the Fat Man wielding Raider, only for him to do something I've never seen before. With the outside secure, I headed into the Super Duper Mart to make a last call for any remaining shoppers before sweeping the store and dealing with any customer complaints as the acting manager on duty. This netted me holotapes, a magazine, and then more holotapes downstairs for a job well done. And the job well done carried over to Corvega as our newly scoped rifle completely tore through the raiders here and allowed us to grab the bobblehead. But I couldn't say the same about the College Square Station magazine that lived behind a locked door. I'll sadly have to come back to this. Since we're in Cambridge though, I decided to take up Dan's on a trip to Parkjet. Not only were there holotapes and a magazine there, but this would also open up his questline and a few legendary weapons. Only there's little to report in the way of excitement here, so instead, here's what we collected! With righteous authority gained for letting Dan's hard carry while I collected completion pieces, I headed back to Sanctuary to drop off some gear. However, as you might be aware, Fallout 4 without mods is rather interesting in its execution. Okay, we're still at 170, which means now I need to find some way to make a box. Alright, beautiful. I'll just put it on the roof. No one will ever know. NPC cannot use elevator. Well, they can't get up here either because I won't let them. I'll put some kind of crazy stuff. The settlers are able to teleport on the roof. Well, they better not, or I'm gonna do something about it. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something about it. So what are you saying? Like build a little shack on top of a shack? Yeah. See, look, they gotta do parkour. See, parkour. How the fuck did you get up here already? So now heading back to Cambridge once again, this time I grabbed a quest off of each Brotherhood member here to boost some affinity with Codsworth, and then kicked in the door to the Fraternal Post to deal with Deadeye and his goons, along with the raiders hanging out just under the bridge leading to Diamond City. All before arriving at the Green Jewel of the Commonwealth to begin another bout of collections. Like the Fen Street sewers, there were not only 4 holotapes here, but a magazine as well. And all I had to do was deal with a horde of ghouls, with Codsworth doing his best to stay out of my way. Might as well smash out Hardware Town too for an easy magazine there. If I can handle a horde of ghouls, raiders are nothing. You piece of shit, get the fuck out of the way! Well, that was harder than I thought. To cool down after that hour of dying, I went and secured Hangman's Alley and retrieved a magazine as well as some goodies from Back Alley Apparel for Halen back in Cambridge. I also visited another raider hideout, that was the Mass Pipe Tunnel. And before you ask, there is a magazine here that needed claimed, only issue is, the raiders and ghouls here were more than happy to send me away empty-handed. So close, yet so far. This feels like the motto of this run. Since I'd have to come back for this later, I stopped by a police precinct to grab a holotape, grab some locations for us to swing back to later, and then decided to smash out the Triggermen. We can grab some holotapes, a magazine, a bobblehead, and free Nick all at the same time. This seems like the perfect place to go now. Well, fuck! With Nick freed and finally completing the first Affinity conversation with Codsworth, I went forward to Hubris Comics to grab the Silver Shroud gear amongst other things. Oh, for fuck's sake! After some quick sightseeing in the Boston Commons, I visited Goodneighbor to grab a few quick magazines before picking up some quests and then assaulting Mass Bay Fusion. Besides the gunner inhabitants vying to melt me alive with their laser weapons, there was a bobblehead just asking to be picked up. We visited some close locations to cross them off, all before venturing into Hallucinogen Inc. to recover a gas tank for Fred in Goodneighbor. And while we did get lost more than a few times, unlocking terminals and securing the magazine went a long way to crossing this location off forever. Except for the unique weapon that I'll have to come back and grab eventually. Unlike Fennel Hall on the other hand, fighting super mutants is one of those things that you need to either have a build made for actually killing things or be good at the game, both of which I did not possess, meaning the magazine at the back of this spot would just have to wait until I was able to keep my head on my shoulders. Being a good neighbor, this left me with a few potential quests while I was in the area, but because Codsworth hates fun and dealing with most of the denizens of Good Neighbor, I decided to head back to College Square and clear the ghouls out to appease Reese. But if I'm being honest, this was mainly to get the magazine that had eluded me prior. See what I mean? The man hates anything that could be seen as useful. I'm so glad I'm getting his companion perk first. With the Brotherhood of Steel pleased for now, it was time to venture off in search of adventure, making sure to grab minor locations along the way. Only issue is, because I was heading up towards Finch Farm to smash out the huge completion quest that is Out of the Fire, this is where I messed up. I stopped off at the Watts Consumer Electronics to grab a Total Hack magazine, and unfortunately, since I was over level 15, this kicked off the Automatron entry quest. And since I shot to defend myself from the Servomechs instead of running, this now turned most of my random encounters going forward into Rust Devils and Death Machines. Well, at least I could get robot repair kits more easily now. Leaving Ada behind to tackle this DLC at a later point, but grabbing the goggles that spawn here, I headed up to the Taffington Boathouse. Not only will it serve as a settlement, but having more beds throughout the Commonwealth also means that hopefully I shouldn't lose heaps of progress in the inevitable death thrown my way. And trust me, considering that I was now moving into the West Everett's estate, a super mutant stronghold, deaths would be inevitable. Well, at least we get a save point nearby. With a fallback point secured now, I just needed to head up the road and grab a magazine at the Poseidon Turbine Station. Except, I had grossly underestimated my lack of gear. 5 was a magazine. Oh shit. Codsworth, I need you to clutch this up. We died to bloatflies? It is legendary. I'm running from a bloatfly? There is no universe in which I should ever be afraid of bloatflies. Not only that, but with the magazine secured, now I had to deal with a pack of Mirelurk hunters keen to remove my legs. Too bad they'll never get to taste my character's unwashed ass on behalf of that I left Codsworth the body block for me. About time he got to be useful. I'll just pick it back up from Hangman's Alley and keep on trucking. Now downtown, I did some sightseeing before stopping off at the Cabot House and sweet talking my way inside to pick up the special delivery quest. This quest line is arguably one of the most important for this run. It holds a bobblehead, magazines, unique weapons, apparel, and multiple quests. So starting it now is a no-brainer. So long as the quest doesn't break along the way, we'll be fine. Heading back outside and stopping off at the Haymarket Hall, I cleared the area before heading to Bunker Hill, grabbing a magazine, and then kicking in the door to an abandoned ghoul's house. Luckily, there was a laundromat nearby to wash away all the juices that now adorn my gear. Ha! Who am I kidding? I'm only here for the magazine! Since Codsworth was taking a long time to actually gain affinity, I decided to visit the USS Constitution. It's a quest where you help robots kill humans and become sailors. If this didn't do the trick, then I had no idea what would. Although, besides killing the first wave of scavengers, fixing some wiring, and stealing a guidance chip, I'd ultimately have to leave and find more rarer components to fix this up. Which means I now had free time. Free time to clear out a raider hideout at the BADTFL regional office, and running back to Diamond City to grab a few side quests. Like watching a marriage, going to track down baseball collector's items, painting a wall, fixing some underwater pipes, and chasing down bloatfly glands. We also visited a Boston police station where I was able to recover the magazine I couldn't grab in Mass Pike Tunnel earlier. Cleared out this house on the way to Vault 81 and waltzed into said vault, passing the speech check and failing to follow Austin around as I already knew my way about. And first stop, Alexis Combs. Although, it was clear this vault was suffering from the lack of mods, and trust me, this would not be the last we saw here. Putting all of that behind us, once I grabbed the Overseer's Guardian, I visited a classroom to tell the tale of horrors in the Commonwealth. This earned me a magazine, along with a doctor's appointment to give blood, before finding Bobby and Tina DeLuca. I sold Bobby some jet, but his sister had clearly seen better days. Her face appeared to be that of a recent victim that she'd skinned alive. But considering she was crucial for a quest and a potential new settler, I'd have to speed things up before Vault 81 collapsed before my very eyes. On our next session, I went and yelled at Ashes before returning to Vault 81 and being awarded a fusion core for my efforts. All this before the climax that is the hole in the wall quest. Austin had been infected by a rabid mole rat, which had me heading into the lower vault levels to recover a cure. However, forget all of that. We have more face melting action, which is far more important. What is happening to these people? Clearly Austin isn't the first person to have a run-in with these mole rats. Heading into the lower levels now, I started to tear through the protectrons and mole rats inside, which is no surprise when you have an Overseer's Guardian. And on top of that, we're grabbing the mole rat disease anyway, which means there's no reason to be careful. We eventually grabbed the medicine bobblehead and rescued Curie with the serum for Austin as we headed back upstairs. This not only saved Austin's life, but finally got Codsworth to idolize me, gaining his affinity perk. Codsworth should love this, right? Yes! And allowed me to grab Curie. Finally, we were done with by far the worst companion to grind affinity with. And what was my reward? Just to talk with a scientist in the most Bethesda way possible. Now we move on to the dependency quest with Tina. She wants me to get her brother off Chet, and if I do this correctly, I can get her as a unique settler, which means I can't mess this up. God damn! I was blown away when I saw how to do this quest. Curie, look, I don't really have an option, man. He was more concerned with hitting the jet than fighting back. Believe it or not, I then passed the speech check to make Tina forget about her newly deceased brother and sent her on her way to Sanctuary. Alright, since we never ever have to touch this place again, let's head over to the Forest Grove Marsh. Normally a home for ghouls galore, but it also houses a holotape we'll need. And normally we'd get it no problem, if the game didn't crash. Arriving once again to the marsh, the ghouls took their time coming to tussle, but since Curie's laser weapon deals so much damage, we were never in any problem. Not only did we get the holotape, but we also secured a sleeping bag upstairs. Nice! And this will come in handy as our next stop is a gunner hangout spot, which houses a magazine. But gunners do significantly more damage. But hey, at least we managed to claw our way through to get the magazine. As usual, gunner life means nothing when ancient comic books are on the line. Although, whereas we had to fight gunners to get here, Now I was tasked with fighting ghouls at the Poseidon Reservoir to recover some tech for the robots back at the USS Constitution, and not even slowing down time was going to save me. Thankfully, my saving grace came in the form of the Roadside Pines Hotel. Sure, some raiders were housed up and looking to turn their clubhouse into a bastion of rebellious nature, but considering I needed the location checked off and the bed they kept inside, there was little they could do when the Overseer's Guardian came a-knockin'. This closer fallback point fueled me to just charge in and see what happens, meaning that explosions were soon to follow once inside the ghoul-infested power station. And not only that, but I managed to retrieve the tech for Captain Ironsides. Besides grabbing some minor locations in the area, I then found myself at the Westing Estates where I could finally grab the baseball gear for Mo back at Sanctuary, not to mention the other magazine hiding out here. Now I could return to Diamond City and hand in all my side quests.
And why not get a haircut at the same time? Let's put those magazines to good use.
And now with a new spring in my step whilst returning to the USS Constitution, I still lacked some parts to get the ship upright, meaning once again I would have to venture off to a far distant land for another piece of tech. Don't worry, Kiri, there's no reason to be sad. Why don't we just go visit this art gallery just up the road? I hear it's to die for. And what murder gallery wouldn't be complete without being able to take home a souvenir? After one hell of an interactive art exhibit, Kiri and I visited the Irish Pride shipyard to see a docked ship, and then visited County Crossing to recruit another settlement. But forget about all of that! Kiri finally asked me to deal with her affinity quest! Finally, we could move on to someone else soon! Although a wrench was thrown into that plan. See, Kiri needed to talk to Dr. Amari specifically, but since you can't interact with her until the Dangerous Minds quest, that just meant that avoiding the main story couldn't be put off any longer, as until I finished that completion quest, Kiri would never idolize me. Seeing how we could still gain affinity though, that meant that I could still smash out smaller locations along the way, finally conquer Fennel Hall for that magazine I left behind ages ago, and then immediately have super mutants get their revenge by repeatedly destroying me at the Revere Satellite Array. And while super mutants may be a hit or miss on whether they put up a fight or not, the feral ghouls over at the National Training Yard were pushovers in comparison. While remaining in this tiny pocket of the Commonwealth, our next stop was visiting Finch Farm to grab the Out of the Fire quest. This contained a location to discover, a bobblehead, unique weapon being the shish kebab, a magazine, and slag the raider boss who adds a tally to the named enemy bracket. However, this place also houses the Forged, who love to use flamers, and on survival difficulty, these things are crazy if not taken seriously. So you better believe I was already counting on learning the ways of propane and propane accessories. But nothing would stop me from getting my hand on that bobblehead, the magazine, and the shish kebab located here. After surviving Hank Hill's own personal heaven, I ventured out to Breakheart Banks to clear the super mutants there and earn a new settlement in the process. We grabbed a magazine at Lynn Woods before being jumped by the most ill-prepared raiders I had ever seen. And to their credits, they weren't the only ones lacking. The raiders who stole the mysterious serum from Cabot also put up no fights. Before heading back towards Diamond City to resupply, I decided to push my luck and ventured towards the coastal cottage. Only problem was that since my ammo was lacking, fights were getting a lot more dire, with having to resort to Pikmin's Blade to actually land any kills. We'll have to leave this spot behind for now. Risking more setbacks out here doesn't seem like a good use of time for anyone. But don't worry though, the raiders around downtown Boston were not gonna let me get off without a fight either. And finally arriving in Diamond City, and because Kiri wouldn't stop asking me about Dr. Amari, I then progressed the plot to open up the Reunions quest. Dr. Amari wouldn't be available to us until Kellogg was taken out, which at this point should just be a small detour due to our damage output. So while in the area, I decided to visit the blood bank near Fort Hagen to grab an early magazine. But sadly, I didn't have the perk needed to hack the terminal, preventing me from fondling ancient parchment, which just means I'm forced to hit all the spots in the region and make sure we invest our perks wisely. Thankfully, our lack of hacking perks didn't mean we weren't skipping out on damage. We grabbed the bobblehead, stomped out some silly synth losers who were mere shells of their Horizon infamy, and then arrived at Kellogg. Being level 35, I didn't think this would be anything but a casual bald man smackdown. However, Kellogg proved that his ability to always scale at a higher level than you prevented me from taking the easy kill. Almost twice! Now able to progress the plot and grabbing the last magazine at Fort Hagen, I decided to clear some of the surrounding areas before returning to Diamond City, like the Boston Mayoral Shelter. Hopefully this place would offer up enough experience in order to grab the magazine from the blood bank before leaving. For this place being a massive underground fort with tons of winding tunnels, it was rather odd that the whole place seemed rather empty. I mean, hell, this place had its own basketball court and still didn't have enough melanin to sink a three-pointer. Even the Deathclaw wasn't even up for the task. I grabbed the magazine along with any holotapes and keys I could find, and then made my way for the exit, only to start running into more and more synths. Turns out killing Kellogg must have pissed these guys off. They were so hellbent on taking me down that they turned on their aimbot and managed to shoot my grenade straight out of the air. After making it outside, I had leveled up enough to finally grab the magazine from the blood bank. Stopped off at Fiddler's Green to learn about squirrels and how to live and love. Did some sightseeing as the Brotherhood wasted no time in clearing out areas of any Xeno threat. You know, typical Space Marine ideology. I killed and looted an alien who had the audacity to crash in my vicinity, then returned to Diamond City to progress the story. While I was in town, I decided to humor Piper and do her interview before running over to Good Neighbor and finally retrieving that magazine that was locked out previously. Then we dove through Kellogg's memories, and finally got Curie's affinity quest to pop! Only problem is, I forgot I had brought Piper with me to Good Neighbor. Yeah, it seems like she's not used to being let outside. So after running back, grabbing Curie, brain swapping her with a synth, and then getting a close-up while she learned how to properly use her mouth, her quest was finally done. And now, to try and appease my new robot waifu, I finally completed the USS Constitution quest. And then took her back to my place to show off my loot. Although, I forgot I had leveled up enough, which means that the way back was now blocked by the Radroach King. Now with Curie officially along for the ride at the oversight of my trophies, we visited some goofy robots who were just waiting to get the all clear to open up again, then stopped in at the Medford Memorial Hospital. Besides the lobby being full of the worst front-end staff I've ever encountered, I was here for a magazine and some super mutant armor pieces. Strong is gonna get a fashion show when he becomes our companion, and I want Homie to have as many options as possible. Moving into the rest of the area, Curie equipped with Pikmin's blade was more than keen to bury it into anything that didn't immediately run in terror. We grabbed an Eddie Winters holotape and then delved into the Molden Center Metro. Searching for a lockpicking magazine while trying to ration your ammo is already difficult. However, why not just use a different gun? And thankfully, Todd gave me just that. But I will say, this shotgun is cool and all, but seeing Curie run straight at Helter Skelter only to loot his friend's dead body and use their gun against them is priceless! With our magazine acquired, now came another dungeon crawl. This time being Vault 75. An Overseer's Guardian got acquainted with the gunners inside, but even with all of the silly mercenaries running into my bullets and winding hallways causing me to lose my bearings more than I'd like to admit, I got my magazine and bobblehead, marking another location cleared out for the greater good. I then dived into the old Gullet sinkhole for a magazine and a hat for Bunker Hill, only to then wake up and see that the Rust Devils now packed far greater firepower than I had given them credit for. Next, we visited the not-so-abandoned Macro fish packing factory, helped Barney and Salem retake the town for a few goodies, all while flirting with Curie whenever she tried to talk to me. To ease our travels, we also stopped in at Sandy Coves. I began by speech-checking a Mr. Handy for a key that led to a magazine and safe bed to rest at, all before heading to the local Museum of Witchcraft to grab a few holotapes, a magazine, and a Deathclaw egg that was barely being guarded. This all combined for a perfect date between Curie and the perfect finish was visiting Hugo's hole only to hint about what was to come later for our budding relationship. Heading off in the opposite direction to avoid another embarrassment, we dropped off the Deathclaw egg, earning us the Deathclaw gauntlet, and then amassed all of our completion pieces back in Sanctuary. With the Brotherhood of Steel now fully back in the Commonwealth, it was now time to take Dan's up on that vertibird ride he offered me days ago. And after humoring the Brotherhood with all of their military mumbo-jumbo, Curie and I immediately went out on another mission, which involved doing drive-bys and vertibirds, and then clearing the super mutants in Fort Strong in pursuit of holotapes and a magazine.
That's far.
Since we were in the area, I decided to stop by the Nordhagen Beach settlement to get the recruitment mission. However, no such mission could be acquired. Whether this is because Preston was at the castle waiting for me, a specific quest that was needed, or Fallout 4 just being Fallout 4, I could not say. But surely this will fix itself later. I'll just come back. So that just means we hit up East City Downs to watch some robots races while fighting the fans when our pick loses. Thankfully there's a magazine here to calm the vibes down. By this point in the run, we were over 30 hours, which is insane to say, but considering we're smashing out everything Fallout 4 has to offer, it won't be too surprising when I say we aren't even halfway through yet. And trust me, we'll easily triple the playtime we have now by the time this run is over. But for what we've accomplished up to this point, we're on a good pace. We go to a new location due to quest and hard clear every location in the immediate area before moving back over. This prevents some of the backtracking and ensures that all of the miscellaneous quests, along with any majors, are knocked out with little chance of conflicting. Not zero, but we'll touch base on that later. Picking back up with the footage that had been playing on the screen, we smashed out the East Boston Prep School before reporting back to Maxon and then visiting the castle to finally give Preston his big day out, which was reduced to blitzing down the Mirelurk Queen and her children with hardly any pushback. Thanks for the free magazine, I guess. And what's better than taking out a Mirelurk Queen? How about swimming to an abandoned island, grabbing a luck bobblehead, and then killing another queen and her children? Then we pestered some settlers at the Warwick homestead who sadly wouldn't join the Minutemen regime, and then visited a beach ship full of people speaking a language with too many dots and umlauts. At least they had a magazine and bobblehead I could still make sense of. Pushing through a factory of raiders for a named enemy, a magazine, and bobblehead, this side of the map was proving to be far more fruitful than any we had seen yet. Mainly because of Quincy, and man, the gunners were not fucking around here. I don't usually come down this way in a normal playthrough, but holy shit, I was not prepared for this. Curie and I were tearing through enemies with the finesse of a beached dolphin. With shots coming from all sides, we were forced to fight and secure a holdout position before regrouping and pushing for the next. Nukes and rockets aimed to see us resetting the area, which reduced our speed to ensure we weren't caught off guard. But moving carefully is only half the battle. Just looking in front of you isn't enough. Okay, we're doing alright though. We're doing alright. What? What the fuck was that? The gunners were dispatched on another attempt, but the horrors of the Commonwealth persisted, mainly with Big Mac and his goons at the Automatoys factory. We're not clearing this one anytime soon, so instead, I humored some discount Brotherhood outcasts to run some parts to the Warwick homestead, earning myself some crab cakes in the process. Only for gunners to come through and get revenge for their fallen homies. Except, the Atom Cats don't roll like that. For the rest of this area, there was little to report other than your typical Commonwealth hostile greeting. And even when you did howdy do your neighbors, the others would run your pockets far faster than white people would clear potato salad at a cookout. As far as reporting the carnage to you, we stomped out a factory full of Big Mac worshippers, fought through some excavators hiding a ghoul boss who just wanted to praise Nurgle, showed some raiders at Hyde Park what it's like to be in the unfortunate path of the MC's path of comic collecting, found a ghoul child who created more questions than answers for the entirety of the Fallout franchise before returning him home when my brain began to hurt. And then cleared out a ghoul-infested town full of cretins hell-bent on keeping their retirement tied up in baseball collector's items. With another section hard cleared and trying to get a better leg up on understanding the denizens of the Commonwealth, I stopped off at a college full of crabs and robot humans trying to blend into society. Kinda like normal college, but without the impending fear of failing your class because you can't afford the book for the course. Thankfully, this one is free. With the fee of tuition to college still needing to be funded, Curie and I decided to rob a bank. And to say Curie wasn't exactly along for the ride was an understatement. She practically jumped right out of her skin. To bring her back down to reality, we stopped by to grab some food, only to learn that the staff weren't ready for us and a scuffle was impossible to avoid. Well, if we won't be served, then we'll just have to serve ourselves. Luckily, the brewery was still open. Another pleasant day in the books. All that's left to do is rob someone who won't be coming home and then return to ours to drop off the goods. Seeing how we still needed quite a bit of stuff from downtown Boston, it was time to fleece Hubris Comics for all of its valuables. And I do mean everything. Fuck you stinky comic shop patrons. I don't care what grade your PSA return got. I'm just here to get a gift for a friend. After grabbing the silver shroud gear for Ken back at Good Neighbor, I decided to humor him and took up the mantle of said character, which had Curie throwing us her companion perk for helping the little people. So keeping that same energy, we stopped by a spit-swapping cage match between the returning star Kate and a group of disorderly onlookers. Well, would-be onlookers, as Kate is currently being recruited and Curie is heading home to Sanctuary. Besides having a new bad bitch as my companion, one without a true moral compass, we headed back into Good Neighbor to finally get some of those more questionable quests underway. Like finally checking in with Bobby for the big dig. Besides clearing out some Mirelurks minding their own business, I was now tasked with heading out to Diamond City to break Mel out of jail, and since Kate likes it when I act a little wild, I threatened the guard to release Mel from prison. It doesn't matter if he was getting out today, I need him now! With the expedition crew fully fleshed out, we dove through Mirelurk-infested tunnels looking for a big score, only to wind up in Hancock's personal empty storeroom. Bobby, you have got to be the worst at planning. This isn't Diamond City! Hancock gave me the option, seeing that I was confused, gave me an option to walk away from all of this, and taking advantage of the opportunity, I talked Bobby out of it too, earning me the Ashmaker and the option to recruit Hancock later at the cost of pissing off Kate. Kate, I have to level with you. Your happiness is extremely easy to gain. Don't act like you're all high and mighty. With Good Neighbor sorted for now, I visited Cabot to drop off the mysterious serum that had somehow managed to dodge being used by accident over and over. And while Cabot was grateful, he cut the celebration short by asking me now to track down his missing sister. Considering how strong I was by this point, I figured this would be no issue. I even talked up Magnolia and stole her clothes in more ways than one. I was that confident in how things were going. That was, until I went to break Imogene out of her cultist boyfriend's hideout. Is this a joke? This was a major setback. Yes, I could just install a mod to console command in the quest. Yes, I could clip into the building and potentially still grab the completion pieces. But considering the rest of the run had been without any major game-breaking bugs, this just meant that the full completion would have to wait until the subsequent runs. Meaning now, I was off to drown my sorrows in the Shamrock Tap House looking for a drinking buddy. Then diving off the pier, once I learned that I could either complete the quest or keep Buddy as a unique settler. Thankfully, the Yangtze was there to save me from a watery grave, and even had the potential to give me a few completion pieces itself, like the submariner outfit, his sword, and some homing beacons to call in airstrikes later on. And all I had to do was fix his submarine. Ooh, where's his sword? I did everything I was supposed to. Where's his sword? What do you mean I have to speech check him 3 times before I start this quest? You know, normally I'd be mad about our game crashing on survival, but considering this sets me back before we even got Buddy, I'll allow it this time. After rebooting, grabbing all the holotapes, and rescuing Buddy once again, I strolled over to the Yangtze and hopped up on Great Mentats to persuade Captain Zhao to give up his family heirloom. Don't mind me as I just remove these ghouls from your submarine real fast. Although, there is one more thing I need. See, this school has a fancy new hat, but Zhao is the only one who has the submariner outfit. Zhao, Todd has sealed your fate. I need that outfit. To prevent further murdering of pixels on the screen in order to procure pretty outfits, Kate and I trounced through the Mass Bay Medical Center in order to find a way to save lives instead of taking them. All except for gunners, though. I've become desensitized to these guys turning into red mist when XP is on the line. Just make sure that when you're fighting them, you equip a useful grenade. Flares are cool and all, but they do little in the way of damage. Since we only found more ways on how to remove life rather than save it, we decided to hit up Trinity Tower and test out our newfound knowledge on the super mutants there, which was pretty smooth. Well, mostly. Now with Rex Goodman and Strong saved, we all took a relaxing elevator ride. Elevator's full, you'll need to wait your turn. Upon reaching the bottom, I got a new pretty dress from Rex and the ability to recruit Strong as a companion. Not now, my milk-wanting companion, but soon, and it will be glorious! Before heading back out to resupply at Diamond City, we scoured through some smaller out-of-the-way locations to mark them off on the map. Made it to Arturo to grab some supplies, got up close and personal with Yapping, and then tried to start the Confidence Man quest for Travis, except homie was nowhere to be seen. It's after 6 p.m, Travis. Where the hell are you? This is goofy, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but not the end of the world. While we're in town, though, I could do the case files for Ellie, which had me chasing down Doc Crocker, who tried to pull a Bobby DeLuca only with less pizzazz, and then finding a grasshopper on a roof, which led to a new weapon and a note. And while in the area, we might as well join the railroad for all it's worth, and start the Tradecraft quest. Now, I don't like the railroad, but since they have some quests that we can do without being locked out, we might as well do them. I then returned to Good Neighbor to grab the quest for the Boston Public Library. Throughout my travels, I had been scrounging up overdue books, and with this, I could buy the magazine inside for 50 book return tokens. But what's the rush? Irma over in the memory den had 3 separate things needed for our completion status, and I'll be damned if I'm not taking those while we have the chance. Alright, now we can hit up the library. Then I could run halfway across the Commonwealth to meet up with Deacon to begin Tradecraft. Tradecraft by far is one of the most Fallout quests of all time. Starting off scaring a railroad member with the wrong countersign, then diving immediately into a synth overrun train enthusiast hideout. But there isn't much to report here other than mass synth extinction, but we did pick up a magazine and receive the Deliverer, which I definitely won't use against the very same faction that gave it to me. No sir, why would I do that? With these quests knocked out, it was time to return to Sanctuary and drop off our loot. And Kate, seeing how capable we were when it came time to get the job done, she opened up and gave me her companion quest, meaning now it was time to sort out the bottom left of the map. Next stop, the Glowing Sea. On our way to the part of the map where all fun goes to die, I stopped by Grey Garden to complete some unmarked quests, and began the Troubled Waters quest to gain the settlement. And since the Brotherhood were so nice as to clear the outside ages ago, there was little some spicy crabs inside could do to stop me from draining the water there. This earned me a magazine and a settlement. We also stopped by Oberlin Station to turn in their quest as well. Now we could go to Diamond City and stock up on supplies before heading out. And to my surprise, after heading to the dugout inn to drop a save, Travis decided to cooperate for his quest. Which just means we get to bully some would-be thugs, hook Travis up with a lady, all before abandoning him right before he asked us to go to the Beantown Brewery to rescue Vadim. Just means we won't be able to save in town for a while. Now, I've put off the Glowing Sea long enough. It's time to head out. Well, maybe after stopping off and grabbing some completion pieces from the Coast Guard pier, and overthrowing the nearby marina, and stopping in at a radio station to grab another magazine and a level 4 merchant. So since we're nearby, we might as well visit the Electrical Hobbyist Club. What? There was an Assaultron here. Oh! Oh, wow. Alright, no more side stops. It's time to get Kate cleaned up. Trust me, this is just a tease of what's to come when we need to grind out levels. But I know what you're here for. The main event! With Kate now fixed, this got me her companion perk and a personal meat shield. See, I needed to smash out as many of these locations as I could on the way to Virgil to prevent backtracking, which means Kate was going to be taking all of our back shots as I ran for my life. And since we had her companion perk, I don't care if she gets lost along the way now. This was all while I could run though, because for some completely explainable reason, there is a lack of beds out here. And with survival slowly dragging me down more and more because I prioritized kebs and ammos over non-existent bedrolls, the longer I went meant the more my speed was reduced. And even when I did find a save inside an unmarked building, I took even more negatives because Todd Howard decided sleeping for 3 hours in a sleeping bag in the middle of a radiation hellhole surrounded by hostile creatures hell-bent on turning you into a midnight snack would leave you exhausted. You know, the man might be onto something. Since retreating wasn't an option, I pushed forward. We found a suit of power armor that would at least keep the rats at bay, but I had to keep dropping gear to prevent myself from being reduced to a crawl. However, against all odds, I did make it to the Children of Adam, stole their magazine, and then stumbled into Virgil's cave. Although he does possess a few items I'll need for later, I don't want the possibility of aggroing him yet, meaning I'll play ball and progress the plot for now. But you're on thin ice, buddy! This had us taxiing back to Green Tech Genetics to drop a save before venturing off the Slam Gunners. Let's be honest, you know how this goes, so we'll just skip to the Courser instead. Oh no. Yes! Oh, I killed the wrong guy. Yes! Did I get him? Oh my god! Well, 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 if it isn't the silly little Sid. Motherfucker. With the Courser chip in hand, I raced over to Good Neighbor, grabbed Hancock, and slept to save. There's no reason to run over to the railroad right away, however, meaning now it's time to clear out the quest log I had. First, Hancock and I cleared out the scum in Good Neighbor as the Silver Shroud and her ghoul sidekick, interrogated Whitechapel Charlie, and then ransacked the 3 warehouses in town for some quick experience and supplies, all before tracking down Kendra and ending her reign of terror. Considering this next part of the Silver Shroud quest would see us venturing off to Bunker Hill, I also picked up a miscellaneous quest for Deb to clear the National Guard training yard, which was extremely underwhelming besides the one ghoul that was still there, but there was also a certain Shelly Tiller, the target Kendra was after, and seeing how I've never done this before, and since it's all in the name of completion, Homegirl got put down, lickety-split, much to the distaste of Hancock. It's okay, I know how to turn that frown upside down. Here, treat your eyes on this! And it seemed it did the trick because now heading off once again on behalf of Bunker Hill, Hancock was now stuck jumping for joy. Just disregard the fact that I may have my own personal rain cloud following me inside this sealed building, because I didn't even notice it during the playthrough. Although the best part of revisiting the previously cleared out areas though, just means that these places are practically all done for you, with the exception of usually one enemy. With Bunker Hill sorted for the time being, I returned to the railroad to finally decipher the Courser chip. By doing tradecraft before we did Green Tech Genetics, this meant I wasn't locked in deciding with the railroad, and could build the teleporter for any other faction at this point. Which is great because that means I can knock out as many of the other missions as possible before their inevitable demise. This time at least. I humored the railroad by picking up as many quests as possible and exhausting all dialogue with Tinker Tom. This is by far one of the most important things we could do, as it'll make getting the ballistic weave much easier. But enough of that. With the Courser chip decoded, I headed back to Good Neighbor to move along the Silver Shroud quest. Got some money from that assassination I did, then took out Swan and cleared out the immediate area for uniques and collectibles. With Diamond City on our path to the lower areas of the Commonwealth, I stopped by and bought a house. All before getting wrapped up in a chem ambush that left no survivors, but gave me tons of caps. I said no survivors! Once again on the path of home wrecking, we stopped off at the DB Technical High School. Not only was there a magazine here, but there was arguably one of the best headpieces ever. And since luck will be needed greatly later on, we also grabbed the varsity jacket just before leaving. We also smashed out the Wilson's Automatoys headquarters. Besides the tons of super mutants here, our main reason for visiting was the holotape spread throughout the factory. There's also the Giddy Up Buttercup on display, but we'll touch base on that later. Because the holotapes in this area were a bitch to find. I mean, look at this! This thing is nearly being swallowed by the floor! No wonder I needed help finding it! Thank you, Mad Dog, you absolute legend! To round out this session, I decided to finally complete Diamond City Blues in its entirety, after grabbing a quick magazine from the lower areas. And with the chem workers dealt with, this gave me a perfect way to smash out the crafting achievement while I was here. Might as well grab the magazine from the General Atomics factory as well, all before swinging by the castle to complete the Old Guns quest for Ronnie Shaw, all to gain some new drip, some random bottles, and a small light show that I will never see again. And it turns Ronnie into a vendor, which allows you to buy a Gauss weapon. With Hancock and I returning to Sanctuary, I let Preston know I would never be doing another mission for him ever again, as his faction had outlived their purpose. At least in theory. Settlements weren't for the greater good anymore, but for my own personal gain. And as long as I needed benevolent leader, I would sorta kinda think about these settlements in the same way you think about a snack after you just ate. Do I really need it? Or am I just filling a void until a certain achievement pops? Before leaving my bastion of completion, I decided now is the time to start outfitting the place with stores to offload all of my unwanted goods, and then set off to pick up Dance from that magic sky blimp of his. This was mainly due to the fact that I still had the Lost Patrol quest that I wanted to complete with him for a huge affinity boost. Not to mention the Loot the Mission carry. Although, that quest isn't going anywhere, which means I could chase up some hidden loot that a message in a bottle told me about. There's 6 of these and we'll need to hit every one for max quests. And much like max quests, another magazine calls to us, which meant everyone near the revier of each station was one wrong move away from losing their breathing rights. Same goes for the super mutants at the Revere Satellite Array. Not only did they have a magazine to make my sneaking better, but they also possessed a holotape and loot on how to progress the Lost Patrol quest. We grabbed the magazine from the nearby marina, grabbed the gainer just outside of Hub City Wreckers, visited Longneck's cannery where we tried to recruit Trader Riley, but sadly this is the last time we'll see her as she seemingly disappeared from the entire game. However, there's a quest here, so Danz and I tore through the ghoul-infested factory, earning some pretty close calls along the way, but ultimately grabbing a bobblehead and a magazine for our troubles. Next up was seizing the Kingsport Lighthouse for a settlement, conquering the Crater House to score a new magazine, chasing down another bottle treasure, having our hopes and dreams crushed at obtaining Reba due to Barney pulling a Trader Riley, went diving for another treasure, and then we hit up the slog that turned into a quest that I had done ages ago without knowing I did it. Getting back on track, we finally arrived at the recon bunker towards the tip of the map, where we were greeted by Paladin Brandis, a jumpy fellow who didn't want to come back to the Brotherhood of Steel, no matter how much a cute girl tried to persuade him. And since he didn't want to give me an award, I decided to take the things I needed from him, which to my surprise, ended with an elderly falling and not being able to get up. Danz was understandably pissed, but chill, dude. If your paladin here just let me fiddle his pockets in peace, I could have taken his armor and gun and happily been on my way. But no, he wanted to attempt to kill me. I'm disappointed in you, Danz. Pick better friends. With the goods secured and the mission successful, Danz and I headed towards Nahant. Besides a holotape, a settlement, and a magazine, this place was pretty tame besides the welcoming party. However, something else happened here that had nothing to do with the area itself. For example, while I was fighting some glowing mud crabs, I lost 10 Pines Bluff as a settlement. I didn't even know this could happen. I've never dealt with the settlements long enough to find out about this, which means eventually I'll need to go get that back again, which just means we'll have to do another settlement quest. Hey buddy, do you think I could catch a ride back to the Pridwin? After walking back to the Pridwin and turning in the Lost Patrol quest, I picked up a side quest called Duty or Dishonor, which had me interrogating some knights due to missing rations and supplies, sleuthing through their belongings, and then doing my best to tail someone without being noticed. Fuck off, mate, I said without being noticed! Now I'm doing my best Sam Fisher impersonation while slinking through an abandoned car park. Eventually I found the culprit responsible for giving away our supplies, and worse yet, he was feeding ghouls! But since I needed him for a special reward, I got him to turn himself in, which granted me the Exemplar's T60C torso. I'll never use this, but it's coming back to the completion box whether it wants to or not. Cue another bottle hunt. Getting swindled into opening up a credit card, witnessed a gunner refuse to stop dancing, and raiding military checkpoints for silly printed images. All before the raid that was Big John Salvage. By this point, super mutants only spawned in Master and Overlord variants, and with the amount of lead and lasers being sent Dan's and my way, it was inevitable that shell shock would sink in. The only thing behind those eyes is fear. Bringing Dan's back down to reality, I solved a small puzzle to grab some completion pieces and then strolled over to a parking garage that seemed like it was more created to test my patience than scare anyone. However, it housed the best paint job in the game, so I'll count it as worth it this time. Before Dan's and I dived into the Milton General Hospital, we borrowed a Deathclaw egg from an absent mother, just in case we needed a snack while fighting the raiders, which I must say the deliverer was more than capable of dealing with. Sure, we may not be spec'd into stealth, but who needs that when you're carrying around a giant Sith wearing power armor? If the raiders don't hear me coming, that's on them. Finally arriving at Kent and St. John, I tried my best to defuse the situation, but St. John is overly trigger happy and will shoot Kent unless you walk in and just air the room out. With the wrongs of Horizon sorted, we wasted no time kicking in the door to the super mutant occupied West Roxbury station. Dan's may not care for lockpicking and hacking, but since I need at least 50 of each for achievements, I'm still making sure to get my fill. But as far as dungeons go, I did like the constant moving train cars as a puzzle idea. Plus, the magazine made lockpicking easier, which is always a huge bonus. But while we were riding on a high of clearing out the nearby locations in one fell swoop, the Fallon's department store showed me that super mutants cared more about guarding their precious magazines than their own lives. And with ammo beginning to run dry, I was resorting to using weapons that were far less effective at clearing the hordes, which sadly sent Dan's and I packing to the last bed we stayed at. We retreated back to Good Neighbor to get more ammo, and while we were there also turned in the Silver Shroud quest to Hancock, all before taking a taxi back to Sanctuary to remove all of the excess gear I didn't need now that quests had been ticked off. It seems the settler in Sanctuary Hills might be practicing magic in their spare time. I guess that's what happens when they don't have a proper settlement to stay in. Maybe eventually I'll fix this place up. But this time is not one of those, which means I'm now out to go do more Minutemen quests to kill some time. And thankfully, one of those happens to be within the Dunwich Borers, which I'll be needing for a few more checklist items. Mainly in holotapes, named enemies, and Kremvid's Tooth, a sick-looking design on an otherwise forgettable weapon. Where are all my Adam's Judgment enjoyers? The best melee weapon in the whole game! Although while this place was normally housed by pretty run-of-the-mill raiders, now the inhabitants have been replaced by a death squad hell-bent on erasing my existence. Thankfully, I have the ability of plot armor, a big gun, and some of the most questionable aim to balance it all out. We eventually made it inside and slowly walked through removing any raiders we came across, all before diving headfirst into Lovecraftian territory as we fought off a ghoul horde. All to gain a bobblehead, some holotapes, killed some named enemies, and the pinnacle weapon itself that will forever live inside a box. Now all that was left to do was fight off some Enclave members who made the worst mistake by setting up shop near a raider hideout. Sucks to be them, at least I'll still get to head home and drop off all of my rewards. You should have picked a better faction. Alright, considering a lot of our running around has been due to side quests, let's knock out a few more! So grabbing Preston, we raced off the Covenant and began the Human Error quest, which had me looking into a missing person. But considering I'm here buying the unique weapons and armor for penny, you may already have an idea on how this is gonna go. Although, what you may not have anticipated is that I managed to speech check my way through this location without killing a single guard. But to complete the quest the way I wanted, I'd have to eventually overthrow the entire operation down here. I'd have to kill Dr. Rosalind and every guard, And yes, I'd have to murder every occupant in Covenant, but there is a reason I needed the settlement. And in this run, Preston's feelings are far more important than that of the townsfolk. With Preston in tow, it only made more sense to continue sucking up the settlements, which means you goofballs finally can get some upgrades. Put them to good use, or this settlement's population is about to nosedive. We cleared out some super mutants while earning us a magazine in the process, turned in said quest, and then blew any reward money on the unique weapons sold at the Diamond City Market. Then we completed 2 more small miscellaneous quests that I'm positive I've already done by this point, before heading off to help Travis at the Beantown Brewery. Not only was this a super easy mission to knock out, but we also picked up a Gwinnett Brew holotape for Buddy, and got a magazine for our troubles, all before heading south in search of more bottle stashes. Only for one of the greatest things to happen. Warwick Homestead got a quest through Radio Freedom. This otherwise ignored station uses proximity to allocate settlement quests, and usually to get Warwick Homestead as a settlement, you'd have to do a quest called Plugging the Leak for the Institute, which we don't even have access to yet. Ultimately, this just saves a tiny bit of running around, but seeing how multiple quests up to this point decided to take a vacational approach when being given to you, I'll take what I can get at this point. Speaking of settlements, Preston and I also traveled to the Murkwater construction site to remove a Mirelurk Queen from our soon-to-be bastion of safety. And by safety, I mean I got to save here, and that's all it ever needs to do. We'll also be stopping off at the ghoul-infested Suffolk County Charter School to retrieve a confiscated magazine on our way through. And while we're visiting schools to further our learning, how about the Shaw High School just up the road? Instead of ghouls, we'll have super mutants, but we get a magazine, holotape, and a few keys at the same time. Normally after doing a few of these smash and grabs, I'd head home, turn in my quests, stock back up on ammo, just reset the momentum that we'd been working with. But not this time. I had plenty of ammo, and I'll be damned if I'm letting some wannabe beast snaggers hold the Fallon's department store from me. With our trophies gathered, Preston and I made the mistake of walking back to the Warwick Homestead to turn in its settlement quests. What's the mistake, you might ask? Oh, nothing major, just taking a stroll. A stroll that leads right through Quincy! I figured the gunners would all be dead since we were here not that long ago, but no! These motherfuckers have what appears to be the fastest spawn in the whole game, and because they have actual weapons that can actually hurt things, unlike Preston here, I'd have to fight my way through using him as bait in an effort to not lose the progress we had so viciously fought for. Through the sound of plasma fire and filling the burning holes in my flesh with nothing more than stim packs, we made it back to the homestead and solidified our settlement. I was so close to having all of them at this point, and once I did, I would only need to manage them for Benevolent Leader. Hopefully with how hard it was to get this one, the others would fall into place. Unless Bethesda wants to pull a Bethesda. On our next session, major quests needed to be completed, and for as long as I had been putting them off, the railroad was up first. I snuck through the night to help Synths run away from the Institute, which opened up the Ticonderoga safe house and a magazine, all before being tasked with retrieving dead drops and setting up Milas throughout the Commonwealth. And while the latter is as simple as walking up to an OSHA violation and setting up a machine, make sure to keep an eye out for any Rust Devils that would be toting one of the best weapons in the game. That's alright, at least the dead drop is still a possibility. Huh. Fuck me, I guess. Now, I don't know if it's the next gen update or if this game is crumbling under the sheer girth of our save file, but this seems to be happening more and more as the run goes on. At least I could still complete some side quests in the meantime before reporting back to the railroad and telling them their mission is scuffed. While this is a goofy setback, we opened up jackpots, and if I've done everything right, after completing it, I'll have access to Ballistic Weave. Well, your fate is already sealed for this run, Railroad, but I'll let you live just that extra bit longer. And while I do wish there was more to report for this session, most of the next few quests were all side quests in trying to clear out semi-radiant missions that would be thrown my way. However, I did find a pretty cool way to defend settlements from attacks in the process. Can I build these guys? Oh, I can! Yes! Yes. I need to build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. I'm building defenses. I'm making sure that these guys have stuff. Trust me. Trust me. It works the way it's intended, okay? Like, it might look a little goofy, but I'm telling you now, it's got everything in the bag.
Alright.
Aha! I built your defenses!
That was pretty dead.